Thank you for being here. I'm Drew Kojak. I'm Senior Director for Transportation Emissions at the White House Climate Policy Office. On behalf of the Climate Policy Office and our partner agencies, the Department of Transportation, Department of Energy, EPA, Joint Office, I'd like to welcome you to the White House Roundtable on Zero-Emission Freight Infrastructure. You've all taken time out of your busy schedules to be here, some of you from far away, some of you on quite short notice. So I want to thank you for coming and assure you that this is going to be a valuable day. We have a tremendous amount that we will pack into it, and we will put you to good use. So on your chairs, speaking of that, you have two documents. You have an agenda, which I will run you through, and you have a document that rolls out that sort of walks you through the breakout sessions. So if you don't have both those documents, let me know, but I think you should. For the agenda, this is the plenary session in the morning. It runs from 8:30 to 11:30. We do have a hard stop at 11:30. We have to clear the room for another event that has to be set up. By the way, this is the Indian Treaty Room for those of you that haven't been here before. As far as I know, no Indian treaty was ever signed here, and I don't think anyone really knows why it's called the Indian Treaty Room. But I can tell you it is the location of the first presidential televised news conference here in 1955 with Eisenhower. So it is a famous location. And later on, we will take a group photo on what's called the Navy Steps. There are anchors on the sides. It's the area where the Navy used to be years ago, and quite a famous location for photographs dating back to FDR and others. So lots of history here. I'm going to do opening remarks as you're hearing now. Ali Zaidi, National Climate Advisor to the President, will either come shortly after me or we will adjust our schedule accordingly depending on when he can show up. He's got a difficult schedule. And then just walking through the agenda, we're going to have three different panels, and those are based on different corridors and hubs that are under development. And the first is moderated by Alejandra Nunez, Deputy Assistant Administrator for Mobile Sources at US EPA. Thank you for being here. Gabe Klein will moderate the second. He's Executive Director of the Joint Office. Gabe, are you here? Not yet. And the third, moderated by Shaylin Bott, Administrator, FHWA, and that'll be from 10:30 to 11:20. Then I'll wrap up. We'll have a group photo, as I said, on the Navy Steps at 11:30. Please make sure you are there. It's quite a memorable thing. And then if you'll turn to the second document, the afternoon sessions will depend on when your breakout session starts. And apologies for not having all those breakout sessions from 2 to 4. We had tried to do that, but there were other conflicts. So some of the folks here are going to have to help us roll with the punches a little bit. There'll be a lunch break, certainly between 11:30 roughly and 12:30 for the first panel. That's led by Molly Greenberg from the Moving Forward Network. We'll also have Austin Brown as a note taker. And Molly and team, apologies, you won't have enough time to go out for lunch, but you can eat at Ike's Cafeteria in the basement. I assure you the food is wonderful. I eat there regularly. Wednesday is Orange Chicken Day, so you're in luck. You're in luck with that. And then we have the next three panels from 2 to 4, led by Britta Gross. Thank you, Britta. Mike Roth. Thank you, Mike. And Bill Van Amberg. Thank you, Bill. And then the last panel, and this will then have a relatively large wait time, apologies for that, will be led by Craig Siegel, so thank you, Craig. One of the things that I've learned here at the White House in my almost year tenure here is that there is a currency of announcements that are sort of the coin of the realm. And so this checks that box, today checks that box in a couple different ways. One, during the plenary sessions that I've just talked about, we are expecting a number of announcements from companies that are going to be presenting about forthcoming infrastructure development. So be on the lookout for those. We are also, I believe, live streamed. And so those announcements will not only be here, but also at large for those of you that are watching, and we did circulate that link last night. But you should all be aware of it. So for those of you that think that Chatham House rules are in order, they are not. This is going to be streamed. So that'll be important. The other thing that we are doing today, many of you, I think, are aware that we had planned this event on the 29th, and then that got moved up to today. We had been ahead of schedule at that point, and then we were kind of right in the middle of it, in the sweet spot, I would say. We rolled up a variety of different announcements for Earth Week, Earth Day being on Monday. This is our transport day in Earth Week. And we have a fact sheet that we are releasing or have released on zero-emission freight. So setting a goal for zero-emission freight sector for the Biden administration, and also announcing $1.5 billion to support the transition for zero-emission heavy-duty vehicles. And that's a variety of different programs, all of which are coming out today as well, including $1 billion for ports and trucks for ports. And Department of Transportation also has a program for $400 million, and there's also another program coming out of Department of Energy looking out heavy-duty charging infrastructure. So those are also very important, and you can find that fact sheet on our website. That fact sheet was inspired by a letter that we received and all the good work that Moving Forward Network has done. So Molly Greenberg, who's here, much appreciation for all that work. So those are the announcements. Let me now turn pointedly to this event and talk to you a little bit why we brought you all here. And let me just look over to Diego to see whether or not you know. Excellent. Nanan, thank you for joining us. So why did we bring you here today? A couple things. Last month, early in March, we released a national zero-emission freight infrastructure strategy. Many of you are aware of that. Many of you contributed to that. And that laid out in 4 different phases a plan for building out both charging infrastructure and hydrogen refueling infrastructure between now and 2040, with phases starting from phase 1 out to 27, and phase 2 from 2027 to 2030, 2035, and then 2040 for those 4 phases. And that was the first step, but plans are very nice. What we wanted to do with this meeting is start to implement that plan. And so what we did over the last couple weeks, and this is really led by Alicia Gilday, who was also the prime driver of getting you all here, so big round of applause for Alicia for all the work that she's done. As some of you know, I pulled off a roundtable in March, and I thought I was the one working on this one and leading it, and then I realized somewhere along the process that it was really Alicia's show, and I was just basically trying to draft behind her. I also want to thank Kevin Miller for doing outstanding work in gathering all the data, assembling all the data, presenting it here. Really nice work with you and your team, so thank you, Kevin, for that. So one of the things that I say about the strategy is you might be under the impression that when we released the strategy that we were starting from scratch, and yet we are not. And what we're trying to do here, and this is really just an initial take on it, is to show you that not only did we have a strategy, but a lot of the work that is being done to make investments in infrastructure are aligning beautifully with that strategy. It's not really surprising, frankly, because the strategy is built around where most of the freight traffic is, where the big opportunities are, where the big freight corridors are, and ports and other hubs. But it is gratifying, I can tell you, to do a strategy, think that you've got it right, and then collect the data and have that data reaffirm that you did get it right. And so that's part of what you're seeing here. I cannot read that, but what I can tell you is that what you're seeing there is literally 170 zero-emission freight infrastructure projects that have been collected really over the course of the last several weeks. So this is not by any means a comprehensive assessment, but this is the start of an assessment. You'll also, sort of embedded behind that map, is 5,000 EV ports for heavy-duty freight charging and 50-plus hydrogen dispensers, so quite impressive. And then daily services for 12,000 zero-emission medium and heavy-duty vehicles, right? All of which is a good start. And what we plan to do here, and I think of all the announcements that I'm making today, I'll underscore this one as the most important, is this is the start of an ongoing process that we intend to continue both in the data collection side and also in the community of practice side. So from this, what I'm suggesting is that this is the start of a database and a presentation that we will continue to gather data and information on and continue to update and publish on a regular basis. That will go into reaffirming and adjusting our strategy as we committed to. And then the second part is that all of you that have been gathered here are now our community of practice, right? You are the leaders in infrastructure and the fleets that are making the big investments, and in the utilities and in the NGOs and in the states. And so look around you, introduce yourself to folks that you don't know, but our intention here is to use all of the best and brightest that we have in this area, which is very complicated, to give us a permanent and continuous feedback loop so that we can make adjustments, that we make sure that our policies are targeted, we can develop new policies if we need them, et cetera. So to me, a very exciting moment to turn what is a strategy into the start of an ongoing process, and delighted that you're all here to work with us on that. I think that is it for my opening remarks. We're going to be tight on time. Alicia is nothing if not ambitious, and so we have 3 panels. There are 6 each. The moderators have all been well briefed, and there'll be different presentations by each of the pairs for 5 to 7 minutes, and then there'll be a round of discussions. So that's how it's going to go. And we'll do, as I said, 3 different panels with a break in between one of them. And then please just help me roll with the punches. Whenever Ali comes, we're just going to take a moment, give him a pause. He'll come and make his remarks, and we'll continue. And so let me just look to Alicia to see whether or not I'm missing anything. Looks like I'm okay. Shaylin, nice to see you, please. Thank you for joining us. Let me introduce to the stage a great friend and colleague, Alain Nunez from the US EPA, and all of those on the first panel. Please come to the stage.
Okay. Okay. Let me start with an introduction. And so thank you, Drew, and thank you all for coming here to have a great conversation this morning. Let me introduce everybody to our first panel, sharing lessons and announcements, very exciting information on establishing zero-emission freight hubs in key United States ports. Very, very excited to moderate this conversation. We're going to be sharing insights and lessons on partnerships to advance charging and fueling infrastructure for commercial, medium, and heavy-duty trucks, and see how all these pieces fit together and how we're making progress on developing this infrastructure within our major freight hubs and aligning with this vision called the corridor strategy. So let me introduce myself and introduce EPA. Why are we here? My name is Ale Nunez. Thank you, Drew. I'm Deputy Assistant Administrator for Mobile Sources in the EPA's Office of Air and Radiation. I support our amazing carrier team that does all things transportation in the agency. So let me give a very brief overview. Our office issues emission standards for new engines and vehicles. You might all be aware that very, very recently, EPA finalized an emission standards for greenhouse gas emissions from heavy-duty trucks called Phase 3. Which will reduce 1 billion tons of CO2 and provide 13 billion in annualized net benefits from climate pollution reductions, public health protections, and savings for truck owners and operators, benefiting the 72 million people who live in close proximity to freight ports in this country. That rule will provide very, very significant annualized benefits to owners and operators of $3.5 billion annualized in terms of less fuel and maintenance and repairs. We have been working also on implementation of voluntary programs for many, many years. Our Ports Initiative program that provides technical assistance to port authorities on developing emission inventories and helping them engage with the communities living in close proximity to the ports. We've also been administering the DERA program for many years through annual appropriations that allow us to help upgrade older diesel engines and vehicles that do not meet current standards with cleaner technologies, emission control systems. So we prioritize goods movement investments through DERA, but now EPA's funding programs have been supercharged thanks to Congress and the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law, where EPA received $5 billion to replace school buses, diesel school buses, with cleaner school buses and electric school buses. We have already awarded close to $2 billion under 2 different competitions and have one that's still open and that we expect to announce the results soon. It's a very, very popular program that is protecting kids' health. Many, many thousands of kids who ride the buses to school every morning. We also have the Clean Ports program, where Congress gave us $3 billion for the purchase and installation of zero-emission vehicles and equipment at the ports, and also for the development of climate action plans. And I'm pleased to say, as Drew introduced this morning, that this morning we have announced our notice of funding opportunity under the IRA Clean Heavy-Duty Vehicles program that will fund school buses, but also other vocational class 6 and 7 trucks, street sweepers, box trucks, utility trucks. So for those who are interested, if you look up Clean Heavy-Duty Vehicles program, you're going to find the notice and more information in our website. There are multiple programs in EPA, the Climate Pollution Reduction Grants, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, who also prioritize transportation. So I'm just saying we are here now implementing very, very important programs and coming all together as partners in the federal government, implementing this whole-of-government vision that we outlined, EPA, DOE, DOT, and HUD, in January of 2023, that is called the Blueprint for Transportation Decarbonization, that talks about a series of strategies to decarbonize the transportation sector and get to net zero emissions by 2050 through research and development, through policy, through funding programs. All these strategies, we have been working together how to align our funding. And to give you an example, the corridor strategy is a key feature in EPA's programs for ports and for clean heavy-duty vehicles to encourage interested applicants to be looking at developing those trucks to the extent that this type of vehicles are of interest in those freight hubs. But okay, let me stop there and introduce our panelists so that we can get this very interesting conversation started. We're going to be talking about developing of charging and fueling infrastructure in 3 key hubs, freight hubs. San Pedro Bay ports in California, the Northwest seaports of Tacoma and Seattle in Washington, and the port of Savannah in Georgia. So let me start very quickly introducing our speakers. So for California, we're going to have Matt Leduc, Chief Executive Officer of Forum Mobility, and Emmanuel Carrillo, CEO of Talon Logistics. For Tacoma and Seattle, Washington, we have Kristen Ange, Commission President and co-chair of the Northwest Seaport Alliance, an executive at the Port of Tacoma. Thank you for joining us. And we have Margaret Sonnen, Vice President, TriPac Regional Manager, Total Transportation Services. And then for Port of Savannah in Georgia, we have Matt Horton, CEO of Volterra Power, and David Hallgren, General Manager, Energy and Charging Infrastructure for Einride. So I'm going to go take my seat, but Matt, could you get us started and telling us Forum Mobility story?
Yeah, sure. Happy to Forum Mobility. I also want to take a minute to thank Felicia, Drew, White House for hosting. I've spent over 20 years, my entire professional career in renewables and now, I guess, energy transition. And I do have to say, between IRA and the last 4 years, there's been a remarkable commitment to climate. And I also want to commend GGRF Awards last week, which should not be overlooked as a monumental opportunity. Forum Mobility is a company I started, I'm a co-founder and CEO of 3 years ago, and we provide infrastructure. We provide infrastructure with a focus on heavy-duty transportation in and around the ports. What we do is we build community charging facilities from the ports to the warehouses. These facilities can charge between 50 and 100 trucks at a time, and we aggregate these into staffed facilities in secure lots. Forum Mobility also goes a little bit further in that we provide trucks as a service. So combining trucks and charging is intended to make this very easy. That a carrier can get into a Forum Mobility facility for a simple monthly fee under a subscription agreement. And I think one really important part of this is that our model, which I think is essential to this, allows for any fleet to make this transition. There's 33,000 trucks in California, Manny and I's home state, that do drayage. And those trucks move about 1 billion miles a year. And the vast majority of those fleets are small fleets, and a lot of them are independent operators. Real estate isn't readily available. The LCFS program is complicated. Incentives, companies like ours can take that, that complication around incentives and all that CapEx and turn it into OpEx. And so I hope that our facilities are filled with everything from the biggest fleets to the smallest fleets, and that we can create a pathway to wealth, a pathway to prosperity through these facilities. I do want to underscore that we're just getting started, and I do think that affordability has to remain at the forefront of this discussion from now until the future. I think that we have to make sure that people can make that transition economically, because that is sustainable. And I think that we have some work to do there. But I know that between the Port Plus Ups in California and the HVIP program that the Air Resource Board is, we are able to put together a strong value proposition. I'm proud that our company has got trucks on the road that we own and operate. We have over 100,000 miles on our fleet, and we've seen the benefits of those trucks. We've seen the drivers love driving them, and I think one of the important things is we've seen the carriers start getting work because they have zero-emission fleets, which I think is another important part of this, is that I hope in the future as we talk about this that we have the cargo owners and the shippers as part of this, because we need to create an ecosystem where the folks who fill up Manny's trucks are also part of these discussions and committing to this as well. And so that fleet, we have over 100,000 miles on. It's running in Long Beach, and that's our pilot project, but announcement alert, I suppose. What we're here to announce is our first, it's a really big project for Forum Mobility. It's going to be a 9-megawatt facility. We're breaking ground in 2 weeks on it. at the Port of Long Beach. And so for everybody's perspective, 9 megawatts is more than your average sports stadium. We'll be able to charge hundreds of trucks a day there. And it'll sit right within the Port of Long Beach, which covers, I believe, more than 35% of our country's cargo goes in and out of the Port of Long Beach. That project will be substantially complete by the end of the year. And my friend Manny here is our anchor customer of that facility. And just a quick intro of Talon is you know, I've seen a lot of different carriers since getting into this business, and there's a lot of doubt and uncertainty and trepidation. And I commend Talon, and I think Manny's very quickly turned 20% of your fleet into zero emission, which is awesome and outstanding. And it's just nice to see people taking the leap and reaping the success of it. So I'll conclude. I'm very proud of our project in Long Beach. I think that as we build more of these, we need to maintain a focus on affordability. We need to think about just like we thought about the levelized cost of energy and renewables for folks out there, we need to think about the levelized cost per mile of trucking. And I think that we also need to make sure that we continue to come to the table, and the folks that move our cargo, those cargo owners and those shippers are a part of this conversation, because commitments from those folks are really, really important to, I think, removing some of that fear, uncertainty, and doubt from the carriers looking to make what I think is it's a generational switch. It's a big transition to move from combustion engines to zero emissions. And I think if there's people out there on the other side saying, if you do this, I have lots of containers to move, I have lots of truckloads of goods for you to move, I think that's going to break a lot of barriers down and get a lot more zero emission trucks on the road. So thank you. Thank you for putting this together, Alicia and Drew, and thank you for your leadership. We're excited about our project, and if you can make it to Long Beach on the 15th, hit me up after this. Thanks.
Thank you, Matt. We look forward to talking more about this, Emmanuel. So, Kristen, can you share some information about what's happening in Washington?
Sure. First, thank you, Deputy Assistant Administrator Nunez and Alicia, for setting this up. It is truly an honor to be here during Transportation Day on Earth Week in this very beautiful room in which no Indian treaty was actually signed, but it is the Indian Treaty Room. I want to first congratulate the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation and the Biden administration on the release of the National Zero-Emission Freight Corridor Strategy. The transition to zero-emission heavy-duty transportation will be a challenge, but it is necessary to tackle it. This kind of leadership from the federal government is absolutely critical to our industry's success. The Northwest Seaport Alliance wholeheartedly supports the collaborative all-of-government phased approach laid out in the strategy. We are very pleased that the Pacific Northwest region and our seaports are identified as a priority hub for the first phase of implementation. We stand ready to partner with you and many others to make this vision a reality. For those who do not know, the Northwest Seaport Alliance is a partnership between the ports of Seattle and Tacoma with regards to our marine cargo operations. I am one of 10 elected port commissioners, 5 from Seattle, 5 from Tacoma, who govern the alliance. And I'm grateful to be joined on this panel this morning by one of our key partners, Margaret Sonnen, who manages one of the drayage trucking companies on which we depend to provide critical cargo hauling services to our terminals in Seattle and Tacoma. As one of the busiest cargo gateways in the country, we play a vital role in sustaining the economic vitality of the Puget Sound region and the state of Washington, supporting nearly 60,000 jobs and $12 billion in business activity annually. We also play a vital role when it comes to climate, clean air, and environmental justice. Since 90% of all seaport-related emissions in our region are associated with the cargo activities we manage. And as the map on this slide shows, a high percentage of those emissions occur in overburdened communities. I do want to point out that that's not all our fault, but we do contribute. And so we must do this to those who live near our terminals and along major freight corridors that experience significant environmental health disparities, especially from diesel pollution. We are committed to reducing and eliminating these emissions and the contributions they make both to local air quality environmental justice challenges, and global climate change. In April 2021, my fellow commissioners and I unanimously adopted an update to our Northwest Ports Clean Air Strategy, which sets the goal of phasing out all emissions from all seaport activities by 2050. And sooner. I like to emphasize the sooner. A few months later, we unanimously adopted a 5-year implementation plan to advance that goal, and we are well on our way. While we have robust programs to reduce emissions from other sources, because we are a transportation hub, we take a look at shipping, cargo handling equipment, and locomotive. Today, I will focus on the work we're doing to facilitate a just and equitable transition for zero-emission drayage trucking in our gateway, which we see as a big part of the larger effort to create a zero-emission freight hub in the Pacific Northwest. Our decarbonization drayage initiative has 2 elements. First is our zero-emission drayage incentive program, through which we will incentivize the deployment of zero-emission drayage trucks in our gateway, including both truck purchases and charging and fueling infrastructure developments. To date, we have secured $33.5 million in state and federal funding for this program. With this level of funding, we expect to incentivize the deployment of 30 battery electric drayage trucks with associated charging infrastructure, deployment of 20 to 30 hydrogen-powered drayage trucks and at least 1 hydrogen fueling station, development of at least 1 shared zero-emission truck charging and fueling hub. The specific fleet partners and fueling locations will be determined through a competitive process in September. In addition, we have proposed $88 million in federal funding for this program, which would allow us to increase its size and impact to accelerate our program towards a tipping point for zero-emission drayage trucks. The second element of our initiative is a decarbonizing drayage roadmap, a longer-term strategy for achieving zero-emission drayage across the board by 2050 or sooner. To ensure a coordinated roadmap guided by the best available information and extensive input from truckers, near-port communities, and other stakeholders, we led the creation of the Puget Sound Zero-Emission Truck Collaborative to develop the roadmap. The collaborative launched in June 2023 and is on track to deliver the roadmap by December. This is a quick overview of what we're doing and the direction that we're taking. I look forward to the conversations that we're going to have today, and the Seaport Alliance is looking forward to our continued partnership with all of you to make the Pacific Northwest a zero-emission freight hub a reality. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen, and Margaret. We look forward to chatting more in a second. But let's hear from Matt. So please tell us what's happening in the ports of Savannah.
Great, be happy to. Maybe I'll just quickly give a quick introduction to our company. So Volterra is a developer of charging and fueling infrastructure for zero-emission vehicles. For those of us, much like Matt, I've spent most of the last 25 years of my career focused on clean mobility. And it is enormously rewarding to see a group like this gathered today. We have, as a business, focused on building great partnerships. This is a great example of the kinds of people that we need invested in this activity together. Our company was established specifically, purpose-built, to develop infrastructure and to be able to attract the capital necessary to make this transition happen. We were fortunate to team up with EQT Partners, a very large global infrastructure fund that's provided a significant amount of capital for a North American expansion. Along with that, we've built a very dedicated team of people with a lot of experience in the charging industry, going back decades in many cases. We brought these capabilities together along with a partnership with a data center developer called EdgeConneX, a group that had scaled digital infrastructure in an incredible way. And we've sought to bring those lessons to the charging infrastructure world now that we're really ready to take this to full scale. So we launched the business as an independent company about almost 2 years ago, been very busy since then. We now have 22 projects across the country that we have under development. So it's been a busy couple of years. I want to speak today about a couple of them. We have 2 that are operational. First, just quickly, I'll highlight the site you see at the top. This is a project just outside of Long Beach in the city of Linwood in Southern California. One of our really important partners, Enride, was there with us yesterday. David Halgren's here. We did the public unveiling of this site. It's a very large facility, 65 high-power DC fast chargers for Class 8 trucks. That facility has throughput of about 200 vehicles per day that can be charged there. As big a project as this was, we know it's a small drop in the bucket for all of the transition that needs to take place, but we were pleased to be able to celebrate the unveiling as these projects are a lot of work. So that's, as we think about a project like that, seeing it all the way through to completion, huge number of people that are involved. Certainly partnership with the utility is critical. Partnership with the local jurisdictions, critically important in getting the permitting done. In this case, the city of Linwood and SoCal Edison, we had great partners on that side. Importantly, as has been mentioned, we need customers for these projects. So shippers and logistics companies like Enride and others are key partners in making this all happen. So also in this setting, I have to say that the help from the administration and from state and local government agencies has been critically helpful as well. Having a roadmap, as we now have, in terms of how to roll out these freight corridors, incredibly helpful in getting us to be able to catalyze a lot of investment from the private sector as well to complement the incentives that the government has provided. So again, great yesterday to be able to tie the bow on a fantastic project, and we're really excited today to be able to talk about one of our next projects that will be serving the Port of Savannah, the Savannah region. Volterra is in process of making a very significant capital investment to that market as well. There's so much activity going on in California. It's a critical key market. The state has been a leader, but we believe that this has to be a national solution, and we've got to start making the investments early in critical markets across the country. So the Port of Savannah has been a high priority for us, and again, very pleased to unveil a little bit of what we're planning there. We have acquired property and are making the investments in that community now. This site is actually going to be almost twice as large as the facility that we've developed in California. It's a massive site. We are intending to have over 120 charging positions at that location. And in terms of the power that we've worked with Georgia Power to be able to procure over 20 megawatts of capacity at that single site. So a lot of what you'll hear today, we believe, is a glimpse of the future. We like to say, do a little show and tell. With the Linwood site, sites like ours and others are coming on rapidly. The infrastructure very soon will not be the bottleneck that it is claimed to be, but it only happens with great partnerships with government, with the private sector. Again, we're very pleased to be able to engage in this conversation today, and really look forward to more announcements like this to come. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Congratulations. This is all really exciting. Let me ask a couple of follow-up questions. I'd really like to hear from Manny, if I may. Sure. So from Matt's presentation, it seems like Talon had already been thinking about zero-emission technologies before you entered into this partnership. So can you tell us what value does the partnership bring? How does it help you even more?
So I think for me, we're just like an asset drayage provider, right? I'm not here on the zero emission, so we have a partner like Forum that helps with this whole infrastructure in place. Right here, we're here to provide service for our shippers, our beneficial cargo owners. And we want to do a better job and also provide a better job with their WARE programs and also their ESG goals, right? So having people like this, like Matt here, helps me to, leverage with our trucks. We're getting the trucks and we have the infrastructure for the parking. And I think Matt could probably add a little bit to that as well.
No, I mean, I hope that we can, I hope that we can enable Manny to continue to do what he does best, which is move goods. And we could be the platform that enables him to focus on continuing to be a great carrier, continue to provide customer service, and we'll take the guesswork out of electrification for him. And I think it's going to be a really helpful model, like what Matt does at Volterra and a lot of us do. I mean, I think that us taking some of this guesswork out of this transition so Manny can continue to do what he does best is a really important thing here.
Thank you, Matt. So let me ask a question of Matt and Matt. Like, let's talk some more about what types of strategic partnerships are necessary to make this happen, right? The whole point of the National Blueprint for Transportation Decarbonization is that it needs all of us to work together. Government, the private sector, all levels of government, community, everybody, right? So what in like this vision, what is it that you're seeing that are like the strategic partnerships? Matt, you talk a little bit about working with utilities. Can you help us unpack this some more as what you're seeing today? And it would be great to hear from you, Matt, also. Matt.
I'll go ahead and start. Yeah, as I mentioned, partnerships are critical. None of us can do this by ourselves. We need to build deep, strong relationships, and having the coordination around a blueprint is critically important. I'll focus on a couple of quick things. Certainly, the things that we most often talk about are power, getting power to these sites. It's usually the long lead activity. Having great partners on the utility side that are aligned and motivated to help make this happen, that give priority to projects like this that are helping us decarbonize our ports. Very, very important. Again, the lead times typically can be as long as 18, in some cases 24 months to get to power, and sometimes even longer. And so this is a very hard problem. We're effectively trying to rewire the grid, the edge of the grid, and put power where it's needed for the electrification of transportation. It is a big lift. The other thing that I'll mention is, I mentioned our partners in the city of Linwood. They've been great to work with, but local land use and permitting is a huge challenge. We often come into a city, they have open arms and say, we love EV charging, come on in. And when we show them what we're actually talking about, that it's hundreds of trucks, it's large amounts of power needed, there's often not a zoning code that even contemplates a facility of this size. So there's a big need for education nationally, across the board, working on local zoning and permitting. That's another partnership that's critically important with the states and local jurisdictions. And then finally, I will again just mention how critical it is to work on the demand side of this equation. So creating policy and incentives to help our customers, the shippers, those that are moving goods, to make this more cost effective for them, to accelerate this transition. We're believers that long-term, all transportation is going to move quickly to a zero emissions direction, but we can pull that date forward by many, many years with the right policy to support those who are stepping forward, like those who've been mentioned today, as leaders in zero emission freight movement.
It's very, very helpful. Matt, any other thoughts on how to navigate these complexities?
I think there's one partnership that I hit on, and I think Matt's hit on, and I think it can't be underscored enough, is that the cargo owners and the shippers are a really, really important part of this ecosystem. Them signaling that they have a preference or a bias towards zero emission is going to alleviate some of that doubt and uncertainty for folks like Manny. And I think that organizing that a little bit better and a little bit more thoughtfully is something that we could all probably take away over the next few years and make sure that, like, Renewable Energy Buyers Alliance did a very good job of this around renewable energy and corporate entities. I think that we could do something similar around shippers and cargo owners. So I think that's one kind of, I wouldn't say low-hanging fruit, but it would be a meaningful collaboration. And I think to Matt's point, like, this is a generational transition, and we've kind of made but it takes a generational kind of coordination. Utilities can go as fast as public utilities commissions let them. And this is all very interconnected. And I think that if I could implore something, and Matt did a good job of hitting on this, is that we can't make a mandate or we can't set a goal and then walk away from it at that point. We have to continuously come back and see, is it working for the carrier? Is it affordable? Is this going to be a sustainable model that allows fleets to make this transition equitably? Are we going to leave people behind in this? Because I think what happens sometimes is that people get excited and they make the announcement, and then that's it. But I think here we just have to make sure as a group, collectively, that we continue to come back to the table and reevaluate. Is this working the way it doesn't need to work? Are we getting permits pulled? Are we getting utilities to upgrade? Are we getting carriers into these trucks, and are they able to do this sustainably and economically and continue to make wealth? So I think that it's just reconvening, and that collaboration is going to be something really important. And we can't just all go back to our specific agencies or groups after this. It's got to be a kind of continuous engagement, because this is, I mean, California, 53 chargers a day for medium and heavy duty trucks for the next 7 years. This is just California, and then that quadruples. 365 days a year. That takes a lot of coordination. That takes a lot of thought, and that takes a lot of action, and we're going to have to do a really good job of making sure that folks like Manny are doing a good job and making money through this.
Thank you. This is really, really helpful. Lots of great insights. So, Margaret, we're going to hear from you. Let me ask you, I mean, as a company that's providing great services, and we heard from Kristen, like really a holistic vision, but how do you, like, as a key team player in making this vision happen, what are the things you're most hopeful about, or the challenges that you're concerned about? Yeah.
So concerns, right off the bat, I would say that most people here think about zero emissions theoretically or philosophically, perhaps, but for me, it's reality. I own the trucks. I own the equipment that we're asking to change over to zero emission, not even low emissions. We're really trying to get to zero. So that burden, is that going to be on just us, on the drayage communities? And so that is our main concern. What's nice is that Northwest Seaport Alliance has created a very wordy name, but it's called the Puget Sound Zero Emission Truck Collaboration. And so it has all of the stakeholders together in one room working over the past year on the burden that I have, basically, is to actually change that equipment into zero emission. And so to be able to have those unique perspectives in a room working consistently together, bringing our own viewpoints to the table and talking those out, I think really does lessen the burden for us. And so there's, when you talk about hope, that's the hopeful answer for me. Also, my drayage company is Total Transportation, TTSI, and we're actually out of Long Beach. We've operate all over the United States, and I run a company up in Tacoma for the Port of Tacoma and also Port of Seattle. And there is hope, because we see, California had the regulations to begin with. And so TTSI has been on the forefront of that for over a decade, of trying those new technologies out and having that learning curve. And there has been a learning curve for the past decade. The technology has changed over time and quickly, frankly. And so to have those changes rapidly happening down there, it's a learning lesson for us. So we're hopeful that for this collaborative, that learning curve will shorten for the Pacific Northwest and for other states to learn from them. And then hopefully to get that, first generation truck up to the, Puget Sound, so that we can use those trucks, and then ultimately get them over to the independent owner operators, who are the mom and pops and are the heavy lifters in all of this, because honestly, the drayage community has been the heavy lifters for all of the economy, literally, figuratively, but literally as well. And so to be able to help us make that actual transition is what we're hopeful for with your help.
This is great. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Alicia. No, thank you. I mean, this is exactly what Drew was laying out, why we want to start this conversation today, showing all the progress that's being made already, and how do we create a space, a community of practice, to share that information. We have various mechanisms in our own practices. As I mentioned, the Ports Initiative in EPA, it's one of those, but now we want to go big on this subject, and that's exactly why we want to learn from you all and figure out ways of disseminating this information widely in order to help everybody. So let me ask, I mean, we've heard business models, right, particularly innovative approaches to expand infrastructure for zero-emission trucks. What are other things that you see that your organization, Matt, has adopted to navigate these complexities of deploying the infrastructure? Are these business models? What else?
I mean, I think that, thank you. One of the things that we feel really strongly about as a company is that staffed secure depots are mandatory, and that meaning that as we build these out, the depots like Matt and I build that are aggregated, I mean, we have to keep these things online. We have to make sure that every day that Manny shows up, that these trucks are charged and that these depots are operating to the degree that a data center is, hopefully, over time. And I think from our standpoint, like, there's a lot of things we can do, but there's nothing that we could focus on more every single day than making sure that everybody gets in their truck and gets to drive it through a full cycle of charge. And I think from our standpoint, that requires us to factory inspect equipment, build these facilities really well, but also have a workforce that's trained and developed that can operate these facilities well day in and day out, so that, again, I think that my big point here is that there is some fear and there is some doubt from the carriers to make this transition, but to the extent that we can have these things run like clockwork and we can have work lining up behind from the cargo owners and the shippers, I think that is just a meaningful and impactful thing that we can put in place for our facilities.
Thank you, Matt. Kristen, do you have any insights on this question? Like, what are things, innovative approaches that you're seeing from the perspective as a policymaker, right? You have a very holistic vision, but what is innovative and exciting that you're seeing that's maybe different and unique in the context of developing zero-emission infrastructure?
Well, from the port side, we consider our role a facilitative leadership role. This particular challenge, the clean, just transition and accelerating it, requires intense collaboration. And that's why we were inspired to come up to create the Zero-Emission Truck Collaborative, which includes, the drayage companies, the infrastructure developers, the trucking companies, the truckers themselves, tribes, NGOs, community organizations, near port communities, because we knew it was going to take everybody. And there's this quote from Field of Dreams: if you build it, they will come, but if only one person builds it, it's not going to happen. That's why we all have to build it, because then it will work, it will be viable, it will be sustainable, because everybody's bought in. So this approach takes a look at both the market, the supply side, and the demand side, the EV trucks themselves, as well as the fuel infrastructure providers. So we need to have a very coordinated approach for this to truly happen. And that's by bringing all the key stakeholders and working closely side by side with our drayage trucking companies to make sure that these solutions are grounded in reality, that they will actually work. And of course, we want to work with our environmental health communities, our NGOs, because they also advocate for us. They advocate on the state and federal level for the policies that will make this happen, as well as the funding that is necessary. In fact, Climate Solutions has helped us with getting funding for medium heavy-duty zero-emission trucks, as well as the zero-emission clean buses that you had referred to that is happening in Washington State. And in Seattle, the Duwamish River Coalition, as well as Communities for Healthy Bay and Tacoma, helps us with our Northwest Ports Clean Air Strategy. as well as advocating on the state and federal government to support us. And we really do appreciate the Biden administration's Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, Inflation Reduction Act. When I travel around the world, Europe to Asia, they tout and envy these particular legislation, thinking that we will advance. We will move America forward. We will tackle climate change and build the clean, just transition. So all of these things together and keeping equity front and centered, I think will make us successful. But as I say, there's a lot to this, but we're ready to work. So thank you.
Thank you, Kristen.
Ali, if I
Yes,
might,
of course.
you talked about innovation and business model. One other enormous opportunity that we all have in this transition is looking at these facilities that we're developing. The way that they integrate with the grid is critically important. There is a huge opportunity to bring new energy assets into the mix here. So whether it's solar energy storage on site, the integration of the vehicles themselves through V2G, vehicle-to-grid technologies. We have an opportunity here to be part of the solution to the grid's challenges, as well as a new load center. And so that's something that we are spending a lot of time looking at, is how do we help not only our fleet partners, but help the utilities as well in the transition, sometimes providing temporary or interim power to help smooth that transition and provide clean, cost-effective energy for our ultimate customer.
Terrific. Yeah, this is great insight, Matt. So Manny, I guess closing thoughts. What do you think it will take? We've been talking about the power of partnership, all the stakeholders that need to come together, the incentives, the policies, vision, and confidence. What do you think is missing from so far what we've said for infrastructure to be scaled up?
I think it goes back to the education, right? We have these cargo owners, shippers, they need to be very educated, because at the end of the day, they have incentives, they have tax benefits. So if we're able to drive these zero-emission trucks with them, and they're getting a tax benefit, then we're able to go with this whole infrastructure, with this parking, with the infrastructure, we're able to get more zero-emission trucks, and then meaning more zero-emission trucks, we have shippers providing us more cargo loads, and then we're creating more jobs too, right? And we're creating more cleaner jobs. So I think that's my closing statement on that. So.
Well, I think we probably run out of time now, so thank you all. Thank you for joining us in this conversation. And I'm turning the floor back to Drew, who's going to introduce our next panel.
Ali, thank you so much, and panelists, thank you so much. Really scintillating, fascinating information and a great dialogue. Next up is our second panel, Scaling the Ecosystem to Support Regional Freight Logistics. Our moderator is Gabe Klein, Executive Director, Joint Office of Energy and Transportation. And those of the panelists, please come forward. And Gabe, please come up and join me at the podium. Nice to see you. Good morning. Good to see you being here.
How are you? All right, we'll let everybody get situated. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, Shaylin. How are you? I'm good. I'm good. It's great to be here. I love coming to these events at the White House, personally, because I get so inspired. I try not to read the news every day. I'd rather just come to the White House every day to one of these great events and see what's actually happening on the ground. I'm just going to read off a few figures that everybody already knows, but we know that transportation broadly is the largest sector for emissions. A third of all emissions are from transportation. Medium heavy-duty trucks account for 5% of the miles traveled, but 20% of those emissions. And as was noted in the last panel, a lot of that disproportionately affects underserved communities. Now, the Biden administration has set aggressive goals, promote at least 30% zero-emission medium and heavy-duty sales by 2030, with a goal of 100% by 2040, and zero emissions by 2050 economy-wide. And I love coming to these events because you realize how doable it is when you see all these great people that are actually doing the work on the ground across industry, government, and so forth. And I always like to tell my team, nothing easy is worth doing. Usually they chuckle behind my back, or right in front of me. But it's really true. I mean, I think we'll all look back at this moment when it seemed so insurmountable to get all of this work done, and we'll look back and say we were there at the beginning, and we did make it happen. I was talking to Deputy Secretary Turk yesterday at DOE, and he said, remember, 1 in 5 vehicles this year are going to be electric. That's across the board, sold. The world is moving to electric vehicles. We've hit the tipping point. It's just a matter of how fast we get there and how we get there. And I was also, well, I was impressed with the last panel, and somebody said we all need to build it together. And I think that's absolutely true, and I think over the next few years, you're going to see that happen as all types of businesses and industries get into this work. And so I'm not going to talk about the Joint Office because I think at this point you know who we are. Maybe a year or two ago you didn't. But I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're working on as it relates to your work. And this is why we created the National Zero-Emission Freight Corridor Strategy alongside the Department of Energy in collaboration with USDOT and EPA. It was really important to take an all-of-government approach to this, and that's really our role. You know, our role is to convene all these great and smart people across government and private sector, and to coalesce around win-win-win solutions that sometimes do seem really hard. But when we work together, particularly in this country, we can do it. And somebody said in the last panel, you can't set a mandate and walk away. And that's exactly the point of the ZEF strategy, is that it's iterative. We know we don't know everything today. We know that we're going to learn, and every year we're going to adjust it based on what we learn, what we hear from all of you. So it's really a future-proof strategy, but it does set an actionable vision and a comprehensive approach to accelerating the deployment of world-class zero-emission a freight network in the U.S., and it is meant to align, unlock, and unleash these cross-sector investments in zero-emission medium and heavy-duty vehicle infrastructure. We begin by meeting freight, truck, and technology markets where they are, and it's not just about the hardware, it's also about the software. And we want to see where are things going to develop next, and then sets the nation on an ambitious pathway that mobilizes action. At the last White House event that Drew pulled together, which was great on this topic, we had 2 companies come up to us and say, hey, it's not just about where government invests, we want to know where to put our money too, alongside your money. And we're ready to go. We have money on the sidelines. So we're going to build on what's working. We're starting in states with zero-emission vehicle enabling policies, and where industry and fleet investments are focused, and building momentum to scale deployment around the nation. And I just want to take a moment to give special thanks to Kevin George Miller in the blue and white shoes over there and the bow tie, who spearheaded this for the Joint Office and did an amazing job. Thank you. And many other people, Alicia, Drew, all the people that worked on this with us, we couldn't have done it. It is an all-of-government approach. A couple other quick notes. We did release a funding opportunity in the Joint Office that many of you may not know about. It was released, I think, about a week ago. $54 million Communities Taking Charge Accelerator. We know that there's going to be a spectrum of medium-duty, heavy-duty vehicles converging on our metropolitan areas because the freight has to go somewhere. And so the funding opportunity includes $20 million for for a topic area on charging solutions for light and medium duty fleets. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because I burned up a lot of time already on ZEF, but I encourage you to go to driveelectric.gov and check it out. And there's also managed charging for clean, reliable energy. There's money for equipment at industrial areas such as airports, ports, warehouses, depots, staging lots, and we're all about innovation. So you can be innovative in your applications. The concept papers are due May 20th. And then the last thing I want to say is that at the Joint Office, we're also working on the back end, raising the bar of the existing charging network and the future charging network in terms of standards and reliability and cybersecurity. We've assembled a really great team of mission-driven experts from companies like Google and Rivian, across industry as well as government. And they joined this work because they see opportunities to raise the bar and really tackle overarching challenges. So we've developed publications and technical resources to support the deployment of EV charging. All of that is on our website, or you can reach out to us directly for information. And some of you are even on our ChargeX consortium. There's over 80 companies working on reliability over a 2-year period. We're 1 year in, almost. And advancing the standardization of the Tesla-developed NACS connector, SAE J3400, working on MCS as well. And moving, and a lot of you may not know this, but we have a project called Everest, moving the charging industry towards open source software tools to support communications between EV charging infrastructure and other systems. So with that, with that, I'm going to leave the stage for a few minutes. All right. And do you want to go on? Okay.
Thank you, Gabe. Terrific. It's my great pleasure to introduce Ali Zaidi, who's the National Climate Advisor to the President, and a man that I've had a great deal of fun working with for the last year. Ali.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I feel like it's early in this room. Not sufficiently caffeinated, folks. We're here for, I think, 2 really big reasons. The first is freight involves a lot of emissions. We are the Climate Office. We care about emissions. And when you stare at the math, there's a lot entailed in moving our goods from point A to point B. And for a really long time, the community, the field, I think has made progress in staring at particular ways to get stuff from point A to point B and thinking about how to decarbonize those particular ways. But if you don't stare at the entire system and come up with an entire broad and comprehensive approach to decarbonizing the movement of freight, you're essentially setting up to play whack-a-mole, because you'll see folks move from one mode to another, leakage across the system, and if we really want to tackle the GHG that's involved in moving the goods that we so importantly need to get from point A to point B, we've got to take that comprehensive approach. That's the first reason we are here. But as President Biden, I think, often reminds his climate team, our job is not to just be greenhouse gas accountants. And I think that's the task for this group as well. The second reason we are here is because a lot of you pushed and organized to get us here. And I think the motivation behind that is not just about greenhouse gas. It's about delivering goods efficiently, affordably, reliably. It's about protecting the workers and workforces that are engaged in this important business of logistics. And it's about protecting the communities that have been forced to bear a burden they should not have been called upon to do. So the first reason may have to do with the planet and the relentless math of greenhouse gas emissions. But the second, I think, is the more powerful reason for us to be here, and that's the people part of this equation. What we're announcing today, I think, is really the beginning of a strategy development that I hope is not just a technology cost curve exercise. That's an important part of it. It's not just a exercise in identifying where the infrastructure needs to go. I think it's got to be an exercise in bringing people together to be inspired to do this work. One thing that's very evident in the climate business is there's, for good reason, a lot of resistance to moving to the solutions we need to embrace. Some folks think that, rightfully, that if you encourage a port to adopt electric vehicles, they'll use that as an excuse to screw over workers. And that's not an unfounded thought. It's because they've seen that happen before. So we've got to look out for the transition and its implications. Some folks who happen to just sell petroleum are really focused on minding out for their business. And while we're not here to protect the ability to sell petroleum for all of time, we need to be really thoughtful about the communities and the workforces that sustains. I think that earlier this week, we were traveling to Virginia, and the president had his remarks in front of him, and we were launching the American Climate Corps, and he had a quote in there from FDR about the launch of the Civilian Climate Corps, or Civilian Conservation Corps, almost 7-8 decades ago. And there was a part in there about not just the skills people gain and the wages they're paid, but the moral uplift that the Civilian Conservation Corps inspired. This is a technology-driven exercise that will call on us to be very creative about figuring out how to accelerate capital formation in this space, project development in this space, project delivery, building out charging infrastructure, building out infrastructure to deliver clean fuels is not easy. But I think if we're successful, this will not just be about the transactions that are closed and the infrastructure that's built. I think this will deliver that sense of moral uplift for the kid who steps onto their front yard that stares at a highway, like so many kids do, and today knows they're going to breathe in the gunk and the fumes from a roaring diesel truck, for them to be able to walk out there and to have confidence in the system that wraps around them and gives them the space for flourishing. That's a really powerful and important thing. So we're grateful for all of your leadership, for helping us, I think, see this massive opportunity, not just for our economy, but for our people and for our shared flourishing. So very grateful. And back to you, sir.
And Gabe, I think I'm just turning it back to you now to run the panel.
There we go. Well, great. Okay, so again, I like coming here because I get inspired. I hope you all do too. But we're here to hear from you. So we're going to hear from 4 freight hubs today. And first up, Freight Hub Port Newark, New Jersey, and Chicago, Illinois. We've got Henrik Holland, Global Head of Prologis Mobility, and Kate Josworth, Head of Growth Enablement at Maersk.
Hey there. Sure. Thanks everyone for the time today and the inspirational journeys that we're all seeking under battery electric opportunities. So similar to what the remarks that we just heard, Maersk's journey on the battery integration front started with investments on our ocean side with our green methanol ships that then led to us realizing we needed to find alternatives to offer solutions to our customers both before and beyond the shore. With that, that has led to really a 3-year-long journey Maersk has undertaken to build out a network of sustainable solutions that we can offer to our customers. It's been a journey full of pits and pivots, and being a pioneer within an industry can be a lonely journey, which is why I'm so excited that we're here talking about partnerships. As we start to embark and really look at our footprint, so Maersk operates 12 trucking terminals across the U.S., and with the opening of our New Jersey site, we'll be able to offer sustainable solutions to our customers at 25% of our operating footprint. We've been able to achieve that within the past 3 years, which is a pretty exciting endeavor, and we're quite excited to open and operate into new markets, such as Chicago and New Jersey. There's been so much talk about California, which is just as important, but as we sit and look at the demand, need, and profile of our customers, the first question they'll ask is, where else can you go? What else is in the pipeline? We want to be able to really invest and convert our network into sustainable opportunities, and with that, you have to be forward-thinking and be thinking of your network 3 to 4 years out. We've reached a really important and amazing milestone within the collective journey we're undertaking, and that in March, we surpassed over 3 million miles we've operated under our battery electric fleet. That's 3 million miles we've taken those emissions off the road into these communities that we're trying to support, and we've been able to do that through a fleet of 141 assets across 6 charging sites and more on the way. And sitting here with Henrik, and he's one of our biggest supporters and has been really the need of why we need partnerships has been super important. I said the inflection of customer demand for wanting the reality of sustainable alternatives and the reality of the timeline it takes. There's nothing more annoying, if you will, when you go to sit in front of a customer and they're very excited to want to develop and drive their full supply chain to a sustainable alternative, and then you have to tell them they're 3 to 4 years out if we really want to drive and offer them solutions. So that's why the partnerships that we've developed have been pivotal to help us grow and scale to be able to offer 25% of our operating footprint under battery electric. So now I'll turn it over to Hendrik to talk more about how we did it.
Thanks so much, Kate.
Yep.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Henrik Holland. Good morning, everybody. My name is Henrik Holland. I am the head of Prologis Mobility. For those of you that don't know Prologis, it is one of the larger names in logistics that a lot of folks will never have heard about. We are the world's largest industrial real estate company focused specifically on logistics real estate. This means warehouses and industrial outdoor storage locations. We operate in 19 different countries, and we have about 3,600 facilities in the U.S. alone. We mapped out what our footprint looks like versus the zero-emissions freight corridor strategy recently. And if you think about the Prologis footprint as a proxy for where logistics real estate is, then to Drew's earlier point, surprise, surprise, there is a really wonderful, fantastic overlay between the corridor strategy and where logistics real estate sits in this country. That also means that there is a huge opportunity for industrial real estate developers and owners and operators to contribute to the electrification of logistics, as in many cases, the most efficient place for charging to occur is actually at a depot or at a warehouse location. So over the past few years, apart from developing and investing in real estate, Prologis has heavily invested in both energy and mobility infrastructure. We're currently the second largest commercial private owner and operator of rooftop solar in the country, and have over the past 3 years, after starting Prologis Mobility in 2021, invested heavily both in on-site warehouse-based charging as well as in the development of dedicated charging hub locations that will provide charging capacity for multiple tenants. So that brings me to the work that we've been doing with Maersk and Performance Team over the past few years. It's been an absolutely humbling and fantastic experience of collaboration. This relationship started 3 years ago when Performance Team Maersk acquired a first series of, I think it was 16 or 18 trucks, Kate?
18.
18
Yeah.
trucks. And that, I'd say, strategy kept evolving and the number of trucks was expanding. So Maersk being a really important tenant of Prologis, we have quite a number of facilities that we work on together, opened up the opportunity for us to support Maersk with infrastructure at warehouse locations. So for clarity, Prologis designs, owns, and operates the infrastructure, and then provides a very simple service to Maersk in terms of contracting for the use of that infrastructure. And I think that brings me to, I think, a really, really key point of this transition is that in order for this to happen effectively with speed and scale, it's really, really critical, at least in our view, that the solutions that are brought to market are extremely simple and that they're repeatable. That the future looks a little bit more like it is today. Today, when you're a fleet operator, you know where to get your fuel, you get your fuel. You don't have to go and talk to an oil and gas exploration company, a refiner, and a distributor to piece all of that together. So our hypothesis is very much that in order for this to happen, we need very, very simple solutions. We're very excited about these two projects outside of California. As you can see on the slide, there's a number of projects that we have worked on across the country. Love doing projects in California. Very excited about bringing electrification into the states of Illinois and New Jersey as well. The final thing I'll say is that I mentioned the simplicity of the solutions that's required. We've heard the words a few times today already. It's collaboration, partnership. It is really, really critical in order for this transition to happen successfully that we work together as customers and partners, but also as an industry to kind of embrace the notion that we don't all have to invent the wheel over and over and over again. I think that's really the ticket to us together as a society and a community being able to embrace this change and really harness it effectively over the next few years. Great. Thank you, Gabe.
Thank you. Thanks. Great to see all that movement on the East Coast. East Coast, best coast, right? Just kidding. Because now we're welcoming Bakersfield, California, which is also the best coast. And we're going to hear from Salim Yousefzada, the CEO of Watt EV.
Thanks so much, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Salim Yousefzada, the CEO of Watt EV. And we're a company that started several years ago with the goal of really electrifying the transportation industry and accelerating that transition. And we sort of evolved along the time to really create a full system-level approach to the solution that we offer. So on one prong, it's the infrastructure. And we've got sites, over 15 sites now, covering the entire West Coast that have been grant-funded, are shovel-ready, and go all the way from the Port of San Diego up to Seattle, Washington. Online, sites that are already online include our one in Long Beach, which went into development several years ago, became operational within a 14-month time frame, and it sits right within the Port of Long Beach with 5 megawatts of power, ability to charge 26 trucks at once. Also, another one that came online last week, actually, is our San Bernardino location. This is one, again, that's in Southern California, Edison territory. It took about 2 years to come online, 5 megawatts of power, again, and ability to charge 24 trucks at once. So what we know is that infrastructure is half the battle. We need to we can't just make one site and have the entire system be electrified. We have to really create a whole network. And that's part of our mission, is to really increase the network and increase the range of electric trucks. And we know that the early adopters are the companies that have put charging behind their fence. And even for them, it's not enough to just come in and charge at their facilities. They need public infrastructure. So separate from infrastructure is the technology side of things. All of the sites that we have are built with the future in mind. We know that the trucks that exist today, given their constraints, are perfect for the drayage and middle mile. But in order to get to long-haul freight, the dwell time has to be reduced. And WattEV has been a huge advocate of megawatt charging. So if you can take a charging time from 2 to 3 hours with CCS vehicles down to about 30 minutes, that becomes key. And that's part of the technology that we develop. We have our own Charge America subsidiary that develops charging infrastructure, charging technologies, and the chargers that we have are built with that in mind. They have 1.2 megawatt power cabinet that can dynamically share between CCS chargers as well as a megawatt charger. Beyond that, we also have a third generation that we're working on that comes in at medium voltage and solves a lot of the issues that you have on infrastructure deployment. So what actually goes into infrastructure is what you don't see. It's the stuff that's underground, all the conduits, all the cables, the transformer, the switchgear. If you come in at medium voltage, you actually are able to get rid of a lot of that equipment and come in directly at medium voltage with the solid-state transformer built into the power cabinet. And we hope to have that installed in our Long Beach site as part of an R&D grant that can showcase that and can show that you can actually accelerate a lot of the depots that we have. So separate from infrastructure and technology, we also have transport. What we realize is that if you build it, they won't come. You actually have to prime the model and create that demand naturally, right? So we created our own transport company to test the vehicles, test the capabilities of the trucks, and see which models work best for them. To date, we've got well over 1 million miles on a number of different OEMs. We've tested the Daimlers, BYDs, Volvos, Nikola trucks, and probably have ran these trucks more than anyone else has. We've tested all of the capabilities, worked very closely with the shippers so that we can create the best offering to the owner-operators. And everybody knows owner-operators make up a huge portion of the industry, and they're the ones that can't afford infrastructure and can't afford a $500,000 truck. So for us, we created Truck as a Service to solve that problem. We created essentially a full-service lease offering that covers the vehicle, maintenance, damage insurance, and charging, all on routes that we've tested ourselves so that we can give the assurance to a driver that they can meet those miles. Now, the site that I wanted to focus on today was Bakersfield. This is a site that really puts together the entire Biden administration and all the goals that they've been working on. This was actually the very first site that we took into acquisition when we founded the company, and I can say we were probably a little over-ambitious when we first started. I mean, it is a big site. This is 115 acres and was modeled after a traditional truck stop. So if you look at how much fuel a truck stop dispenses, that equates to roughly 25 megawatts of energy required. Now, no utility is going to have 25 megawatts of power. And a new startup without any credit going to a utility asking for that is probably going to get turned down pretty quickly. So what we did was try to test new models. We wanted to do a solar and battery storage system, have an interconnection, have second life batteries. Along that way, we realized that there are some challenges and the technology just isn't there yet. You're also going to run into permitting challenges. But this is a site that I'm happy to announce on May 6th is going to be operational. We have 16 chargers that are connected to the utility side of things, and then we have a certain set of chargers that are completely islanded. So this allows us to operate as if utilities aren't ready to test that. We have 5 megawatts of solar, 3 megawatt hours of battery storage, and the system wasn't designed to cover charging outside of the daylight hours because you would need significantly more battery storage to do that. It was modeled to be operational during the daylight hours, and then as a backup, you can use the utilities 6 megawatts that we have over there, but also to scale it out. I mean, we still have well over 75 acres there, so the 5 megawatts of solar covers very little portion of that. As the demand grows, so will the site. We'll be adding more solar, more battery storage, and more chargers. This is also the site that's going to host the first operational megawatt charger. We have our second generation 1.2 megawatt power cabinet there, and it will be functional. There's obviously no trucks yet, but we are working very closely with the OEMs to go in that direction so that we can start working with the trucks that exist today with CCS capability, and then also as megawatt charging trucks become available, have our sites ready to go with MCS chargers. So again, May 6th is when the site is opening. We'd love for anyone of you guys to come out, and then also for the existing sites that are operational, reach out. Any of the carriers that need charging, come charge at our facilities. I mean, our sites are operational, and we're happy to have people come and use them. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, and congratulations. That's a huge feat. I think I just got an email this week about that opening. Congrats. Okay, we're going to now talk to the Port of Oakland, California. Sunchet Bhatt, Chief Business Officer, EV Realty. Any connection, Shaylin? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabe. I'm Sunchet Bhatt with EV Realty. I want to thank, first of all, Alicia and team for organizing this, as well as the Biden administration for the continued leadership in this space. I have been in the infrastructure space for about 20 years, about 6 years or so in the EV space, and so this is great to see this group of people come together here. Just as a quick background on EV Realty, we are about 2 years old, a relatively young company in this space, but we've built a team that has a lot of collective experience across infrastructure, EV charging, and fleet management. And we are focused on building out multi-fleet charging hubs in grid-advantaged locations. And so these are facilities designed for EV charging for medium and heavy-duty vehicles. And I want to talk a little bit about the multi-fleet charging hub model. I think traditionally people have thought about charging and sort of across two spectrums. One is sort of behind the fence, single fleet serving depot charging. And then on the other end of that spectrum, public charging, so the 24/7 public truck stop, as an example. What we are doing in the multi-fleet charging hub is essentially combining the best of those worlds, and it's sort of a hybrid model. And so at these facilities, you can charge overnight, and then when those vehicles are out and about running their routes, you can have daytime high-speed charging. And so we view this as an incredibly important business model and solution to the challenge, especially when you overlay a number of the constraints that we've talked about, and I'll talk about a little bit more. So excited to be here and talk about what we are doing. I think the piece that on these multi-fleet charging hubs, I think as we have talked to a number of customers, that we have heard is there are constraints on the grid, constraints on space, and constraints from a lease perspective for a number of fleet operators. And so this off-site charging hub model serves as an opportunity for those fleets to be able to transition. We engage with them with charging as a service contracts, and then they're able to charge at our facilities and grow their operations without having to deal with sort of the capital infrastructure challenges. The site that I would like to share with all of you here is our first site. This is in Livermore, California. This is about 40 miles or so from the Port of Oakland. Sits in between Oakland and Stockton. So these are two large ports. Both are communities that have that suffer from significant amount of air quality challenges, as well as high pollution from diesel trucks. And this sits on the Interstate 580 corridor that sits in between those two ports. Our facilities are designed to be able to charge a variety of vehicle classes, as well as multiple fleets. And so you can see this site, 7 megawatts of power. We're estimating it to be online and operational in Q1 of 2025. And it has a combination of pull-through stalls as well as pull-in stalls, as well as parking stalls. And this is really important because a number of fleet operators will start their day early in the morning, and their drivers need places to park their personal vehicles. They'll get into their work truck, run their route, come back, get into their personal vehicle, leave, and then their work truck will charge overnight. And so, excuse me, this is something that we have heard from a number of fleet operators as an important feature, characteristic to have at these sites. It also allows us to be able to stack different duty cycles of fleets and be able to charge off of the same shared infrastructure. And so additionally, we have a variety of amenities on our sites. And so this is our first of many, and I wanted to also share that we have very ambitious plans to grow outside beyond California, and we recently closed a $200 million joint venture that will allow us to expand our sites and focus on these key freight hubs that have been identified thanks to the White House's work. So thank you for all the work on this, and we're excited to be here.
Very exciting. Congrats. And now we're going to hear Port Newark, New Jersey. We're going to hear from Pip Decker, the CEO of Current Trucking.
Good morning, everyone. Just a special thank you to Drew and Alicia for hosting us, as well as Kevin Miller, and shout out to his bow tie. It's probably the nicest bow tie in the Capitol Hill right here. So it's got me thinking spring because we've been in the chilly north. My name is Pip Decker. I've spent 17 years developing renewable energy projects here in the United States, as well as in the Caribbean and Latin America. My team in Morristown, New Jersey, is hopefully watching this on live stream, and I'd say thank you all for being part of this journey. This is an adventure. This is not easy. Matt, I'm sure you're aware when you were first developing renewable projects, it was just like this. This is tough, and we know it, and having you all here behind us working on these impactful projects, it means a lot. It means a lot for our operators, and it takes a hockey team if we're going to do this and go win the Stanley Cup and fight zero-emission freight in a positive way. We have to lead it out, and the recognition today really here is the people that helped us make this project happen. This is a Port of Newark. This involved various stakeholders, including IMF. My good friend Chris, who runs trucks in the Port of Newark, called me many years ago and said he was interested in this kind of solution. And this project has come together because of the work of the Port Authority. Special shout out to Beth Rooney, Don Neville at PSE&G. We also have the New Jersey Transit and Planning Authority, which provides critical grants for these kind of projects to stand up and have legs. So it truly takes a number of key players all pulling at the same time to what we say is pulling green forward. That is our mission, and sometimes we say it's pulling green forward, kicking and screaming. We've done some electrical firsts. We did the first port electrification project for the Port of Virginia. We delivered on the bottom a charging station that was built in West Virginia. We delivered it on a electric semi into the Port of Virginia, as well as another port electrification project that commenced and is now operational in Newark late last year. We try to follow the lead. If we're doing it right, we're just the EV mud flap on this whole story. Current is backed by Ares Management, and we have projects that span various classes of vehicles, including electric buses, and we're no stranger to things that have been going on in the market today, but our goal is really to lead it out. And I'm excited to hear the story of what zero-emission freight will be. Is this our moment to be in a renewable energy credit, to help monetize and incentivize others to roll zero-emission freight on a per-mile basis? I'm excited to hear what that means. But again, I just thank everyone for being part of this adventure. This is going to be a long generational run. It's a 20-year run. Mm-hmm. The technology is getting better. The products are getting better. And the awareness of what these things are, trucks as a service, which we provide, charging as a service we provide, infrastructure as a service we provide, are all things that can help buoy this market and lead it forward. So thank you all here, and appreciate it, Gabe.
Thank you. All right, let's jump into some Q&A. I basically adjusted all my questions listening to you all talk. It was so interesting. All of you talked about integration being important and partnerships being important. You can't do everything yourself. And Henrik, you talked about how, you're a real estate company. You're also an energy company now. What were you? One of the largest solar providers, and you're a mobility company. now. It seems like all of you have your niche, but then you have to be integrated to some extent through partnerships. So I don't know, we could start with you, Henrik. Could we talk about how that works and the importance of it?
Well, I think the word collaboration and partnership was mentioned a few times today. Also, the word system was mentioned. So, and there's a technical aspect to that, vehicles, hardware, software, that needs to be integrated. That requires partnerships between vehicle OEMs, hardware manufacturers, software, charge point operators. And then on the infrastructure development side, there's kind of a techno-economic system there as well. From a infrastructure perspective, the great opportunity of EV is that we actually kind of change how fueling occurs in the system to lead to more optimal outcomes. What I mean with that in simple terms is that you can charge now where it actually makes sense to do so. And that supports a bunch of stuff, including, very importantly, driving down the cost of EV adoption. Right? So in order for us to drive down cost, of course, we need to drive down battery cost, et cetera, but also, on the flip side of that, increase utilization, which is kind of an indirect way to address cost. So it's really, really critical that we bring these parties together, and that includes where trucks will charge and the developers and operators of those sites, which to a large degree, as I pointed out earlier, are logistics real estate companies. And I think in the past that has been a little bit of an overlooked problem. But there's a lot that we can do to improve things through collaborations, partnerships, to avoid some of the hiccups that we've seen, for example, in the deployment of commercial rooftop solar, which to a large degree, still has a lot of potential in front of it, where you had this disconnect between an incentive for the owner of a location and the tenants in the site, right? So by stepping into the conversation and the equation as a real estate developer and owner and operator, we're aiming to kind of fix that particular systems problem that we have. So again, it's been a fantastic journey. We have invested heavily in rooftop solar and making great progress there to unlock that problem. And I think progress over the last 3 years with the tens of projects that we have brought to life demonstrates that by working together, we can really accelerate the transition to EV.
Great. And Kate, you all work closely. You're head of growth enablement, and I understand you work with a lot of startups and new business models. Well, you can talk about how you partner, but also, what are you seeing in terms of where business models are evolving, changing, going since you're on the front lines?
Yeah, sure, happy to. So within my role, I help on the strategic side of where it's really the inflection of where customers are looking for opportunities and where we can be innovative and creative in finding those opportunities for them in the drayage space. So drayage being that short haul trucking market. So for us, the ability to understand what networks will be coming on has been pivotal, where we can tap into, and even how we've had to adjust a network. So for us, even saying, using California, if we want to start local to the port, then we want to reach up to the Inland Empire, which is a whole different set of warehouse up there. What network do we need to build? Who can we tap into to perhaps I don't need to domicile my truck there, but I need to have an access to charging there so I can top it up to get it back to its home base. And so I think that has to be a shift in the model as we develop this infrastructure on what the operator truly needs. You can't shift from a diesel mentality to an electric vehicle mentality overnight. It takes some time in coaching and working with your drivers, understanding your dispatch plans and overlaying all of that with your hours of service and your charging capabilities. You're constantly having to do a tap dance. Similar to when you're also trying to build out new infrastructure. We've had to be very creative and innovative on what good looks like with Prologis. There are some steps that we had to take to say, we need to get the site up and going. Our operators need to test and feel and drive these trucks so we can at least start to understand how they work. So we might have to do some temporary solutions just to be able to get the site up and going. And that has proven dividends for us, as it allows for us to coach, train drivers. So as soon as we have these sites up and going, the drivers and our dispatchers know how to plan the network of freight moving in to really maximize the potential. So I think there's innovation in partnership, but there's also, you cannot think about the operator and how they have to shift their mentality and the needs the operator needs. So in many of these ports that we've been chatting with, they only operate under a single shift. Their gates are open 8 to 6. That's when I can go in and grab the cargo. That doesn't allow for me to sweat the asset. Sweating the asset is what's going to drive down my operational component and is going to increase customers wanting to convert to these. So it is this balance of, yes, the infrastructure, but then also how we need to look at what is an operating model with our partners.
Great. And then I would also ask Pip, because your company provides end-to-end solutions, right? So that must be pretty complex. You must need a lot of partnerships to make that work. What have you learned about that?
I think it's trying to speak a consolidated language. I think, National Grid, recognition to you all here. I think Jeff's in the room. We have an operational charging station with them, and a number of our teammates have Class A CDLs, as well as background in building renewable energy assets. When you think about the world that electricity is coming from and over the road is coming from, we've got to meet in the middle. And I think the shared language of today, zero-emission freight is one example, is a way to kind of speak a combined language so we can have a single product deployment that's successful. We need to make sure our operators feel like they made the right decision. And so we have to be operators ourselves. So I can parallel park a semi, and it's a great joy. The second great joy is having children. But I think that's really what it's about. It's being out in the yard with our team members and trying to make sure we can relate to them simply, but then in the background work with utilities to understand that we're low growth. We're new customers out of concrete. It's pretty good. So I think that's the combined vision is willing utilities that really understand, the experiences and lessons learned, like NYSERDA, who's tremendously scaled the renewable energy credit market there. And now they're doing the same on medium and heavy duty freight. So I give the utility field just an enormous amount of credit in helping all these projects come off the ground on the targets they said they would. So
great, thank you. Let's talk for a minute about unique, innovative approaches, solutions to issues that pop up. And I was going to ask Sunchet and Salim to talk about anything that you've adopted to successfully navigate the complexities of deploying, electric vehicle infrastructure with 7 megawatts plus in these areas.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing we've learned is that no two sites are the same. They all come with their own set of challenges and intricacies. Long Beach was unique because it was a site that was nearly paved, 1.5 acres, had power from Southern California Edison already available. So it went very smoothly. I mean, obviously we came across challenges in terms of procuring equipment or construction delays, but managed to work through those. We'll also come across properties that are in development, and we'll go to the city and they'll take out their binder and say, okay, electric truck stop, we don't have that in there. I mean, it's a new thing that a lot of cities just don't have. They're very receptive of it, they want it, but they just don't know how the permitting aspect of it works. And we have to work with them and go through that process. Then you'll go through challenges like we have in Bakersfield, where Kern is notorious for having a lot of solar and battery storage projects. And a lot of these battery storages that go through permitting, it's probably the most difficult process that you'll come across. I mean, it takes a lot of time. And that is part of the challenge. It's not just technology and build out. You also have the permitting, which takes a tremendous amount of time. And coming up with solutions to streamline those and working with all the project partners, whether it be the city, the utilities, the procurement for electrical contractors. All of these need to be coordinated in advance so that you try to make it go as smoothly as possible. Obviously, there's going to be hiccups along the way, but got to work through that. Then there's the operational challenges once the site's already once you get the site developed. I mean, for us, we have over 99% uptime on the chargers, so it works pretty well, and we manage all of that remotely with our software. But the challenges that I'm talking about now is like the operation of the trucks. An electric truck is very different from a diesel truck. It is heavier, it takes longer to charge, it's more expensive, and in our model, to bring down the total cost of ownership, we want to utilize these trucks as much as possible. So, even though they work perfect for drayage and middle mile, we want to do as many shifts as possible on those trucks to bring down that total cost of ownership. So we'll work very closely with shippers and carriers. On the shipper side, they've opened up their books to us and said, okay, here's all the lanes that we have in the US. What does it take to electrify that? And we'll say, okay, this is a portion that we can electrify today. Now let's look at the frequency and see how we can do multiple loads a day, and then be able to go to an owner-operator and say, okay, here's the truck, here's the routes, here's the schedule, go, and just essentially hold their hand initially to get them on their feet. So, that's just some of the stuff that we've gone through, some of the challenges, and there's obviously a lot more that's going to come from advances in the technology, as well as in software to create that ideal schedule for those drivers.
Yeah, so before coming to EV Realty, I spent about 16 years at Pacific Gas and Electric Company, so the Northern California utility company. And I think through those 16 years, I've gained a deep appreciation of the complexity of the grid. I think if you look at nationally, you've got over 600,000 miles of transmission lines. You've got even more when you consider distribution lines. And this complex web instantaneously matches supply and demand. And I think there are very few industries that do that. And I think what is fundamental when you think about transportation is that electric grid was never designed to be the fuel source for transportation. And so for us, when we think about developing sites, we start with the grid. And so we have built out some proprietary software that analyzes grid information. We start there. Then we layer on customer information. We layer on traffic patterns, and we layer on land use conditions. And then we sort of are able to sift through all of this data. And for example, in California, we have analyzed over 10 million parcels, 10 million parcels and hundreds of thousands of distribution circuits and partial circuits. And so we are able to overlay all of that data and make sort of very intentional, informed decisions around acquiring property that has access to large amounts of power on day one. And we think that's incredibly important, not only to be able to accelerate the deployment of infrastructure by avoiding sort of costly and lengthy grid upgrades, but probably more importantly is thinking about this transition in the long term and thinking about how by maximizing the existing utility distribution infrastructure, we can actually help deploy this infrastructure at a lower societal cost by trying to minimize that impact on utility ratepayers.
That's great. Well, that brings us to our final question. I was going to give each of you 1 minute because you've either learned from your first couple initial projects or you've been scaling for a while. But when you think about scalable growth now, the next phase, right, the next wave of users coming in, what have you learned in terms of what's the critical factor or critical strategy that you think will be key to scalable growth for your company and the industry? And I'm going to put you on the spot and start with you, Kate.
Okay. I think critical factor for us is access to charging. That's plain and simple. If I have access to know I can charge my truck, I can take my truck anywhere. I just need to have the charging available so I can support the ask of my customers. We have so many multinational companies that want to invest, they want to have these solutions, but the network isn't there to support their needs. And so being able to size and scale up a network in other markets is going to be important so we can create. So that's why the corridor freight strategy is fantastic, well-timed. Look forward to using it. So let's go.
Awesome. Henrik?
So in order for, in this market-based system that we all operate in, for things to be sustainable over time, it needs to be profitable and repeatable. So for that, there's a technical and a commercial component to that. So a really, really key aspect of that is standardization of technology across the board as an industry. That's really, really something that we need to come together on. And I think the second component is network planning. To Kate's point about the access needs to be there, I mentioned we have 36 facilities in the country, 3,600 facilities in the country. All of those are potential nodes on this charging network. So the vision that we have is that over time, I think a lot of initial deployments are kind of private behind the fence. We're already seeing a move by customers to be okay with opening that up for third-party charging. So although we develop projects at Prologis warehouses, non-Prologis warehouses, about half of the projects that we're working on with Kate and her team are actually at non-Prologis facilities, and we're doing these charging hubs. That's going to be the network. So think about that there's thousands and thousands of warehouses, industrial outdoor storage sites in this country. Those will all be points on the network. For that, we need to come together, we need to standardize, and we need to make sure that we can develop this infrastructure at lower cost and in a way that's more predictable and transparent. And that leads us to a whole thread on utility processes, but I only had a minute, so I'll let some of the other speakers talk
But that's really interesting. Private becoming public makes standards even more important.
Exactly. Standards are key, and as that happens, the site goes from like 10% utilization to 30 to 40, and again, cost goes down. So the future is bright, and there's going to be a lot of fantastic ubiquitous charging out there.
I think that was like 3 minutes, but it's fine. Pip?
I just segue off rooftop solar for a second. Once those projects are operational, not much changes. There's not much variation, and there's some seasonality in your total generated system performance. But with trucks as a service and charging depots, you're starting to see utilization rates climb as technology improves. So when we think about our next projects, we always think about the best available product with the right use case. And so how do we just drive performance through the meter? How do we add the best vehicles there? It's really to create functional liquidity in these yards, to ensure that you always have an optimized use case for your operators. And that will bring greater adoption, because ultimately it's just a better product that's functionally cheaper.
So continuing to evolve the business model for the infrastructure to make it work for the users as they evolve.
That's right.
Great. Salim?
Yeah, just relaying off of everybody. Start the conversation with the stakeholders early. Utilities being a big one. I mean, SC has done a great job now with creating tools that can make it easier for people to see how much power is available at as a site. And I'm sure that tool will develop further along the way. But starting those conversations early is very helpful. Also, plan sites for the future. Demand is only going to grow as more and more electric trucks become available and the cost goes down. So don't just plan for a phase 1, plan for phase 2 and future generations, as well as charging capabilities that go beyond NACS or CCS and eventually MCS. And then also, for us, I mean, we're trying to drive down the cost of the trucks significantly. I mean, right now, we've only seen the cost of trucks go up from a lot of the OEMs. And our theory is that if you're able to start, adoption much more massively and going towards a large order, can we drive down those costs both on the vehicle as well as on the hardware side?
Great. So start with the grid and analyze that, and then future-proof for other investments in the future.
I think everyone else on the panel have hit on all the big ones. What I would flag is just alignment. I think looking at the people in this room, we need sort of broad alignment across this ecosystem. And so kudos to you, Gabe, and many others who have sort of laid out the ZEV freight strategy. I think that is a first incredibly important step to drive that alignment. That is, this is alignment across federal, local, federal, state, and local governments. This is alignment across utilities, alignment across a number of local community stakeholders that this is our future and we need to be driving towards that future. And it is easy to say that, and I think as others said earlier, we can't just lay out a policy and step back. There's a lot of hard work that's going to happen between now and making that future a reality. And I think what is incredibly exciting about the rest of today is that the conversations that are going to be happening by those that are here today are all aligned around that. And so maybe that's a good segue for the rest of the day.
For closing, yeah, no, thank you so much. And just to tie this up at the end, I think it was Pip who said, like, it's just so important to like come to a place like this and see that that we have your back. Everybody's working together. And I can tell you from my standpoint, working in the government, formerly in the private sector, this administration definitely has your back. Drew at the White House has your back, DOE, EPA, DOT, the Joint Office, and we're here to work with you to be successful. And you can certainly come to us with any questions, and we'll get you to the right people. But thank you so much for participating. Thanks to all of you for listening to the panel. Back to Drew.
Thank you so much. What a terrific two panels we've had. Thank you, Gabe, for moderating. We have our break. We only have 10 minutes for our break, and we have about 100 people here. So please take your break now. Go forth and stretch. There's a little coffee out there, but you got to be back by 10:35. Distinct pleasure to introduce Shaylin Bott, who's the Administrator for Federal Highway Administration, US DOT, to lead our third panel, which is Connecting Freight Hubs with Corridors. And with that, Mr. Bott.
Good morning. Yeah, see what Ollie say? We're on low caffeination. Now that's fixed. Everybody got their caffeine. And I just want to thank Drew and the team for bringing us together. I mean, this is just a fantastic convening and great conversations. And I think that is part of the challenge of coming back from a break, is all the great conversations that are happening. I really enjoyed that last panel. Where's Pip? Pip talking about semis and parallel parking them, and also equating that with children and his children. That was great. And Sanchez talking about the systems approach. I think that's incredibly important. I'm the Federal Highway Administrator now, but in my previous career, I've worked in the private sector. But in 2011, I was the Secretary of Transportation in Delaware, and we put some charging stations on I-95 in the hopes that some lonely Chevy Volt on its way down from Boston might charge in Delaware on the way down. And we're using RGGI funding at that time. Then I was the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Transportation, and we took our Volkswagen funding that came in, and we actually partnered with Utah and Nevada to try to set up a regional corridor so that we could have people go from Denver all the way down to Vegas, and there'd be a semblance of, once you got beyond our state borders, that there would be somewhere to plug in. But again, that was VW money. There was no federal funding that was really available. And that's why it's so amazing to be part of an administration that actually, whether it's through the bipartisan infrastructure law, the $1.2 trillion bill, $350 billion of that comes through federal highways, $7.5 billion of that set aside for our NEVI and CFI programs, which we'll talk about in a bit. But it's this idea of corridors. Because unless we build these as corridors, we're not going to be able to connect everybody. And at that time, when we were putting those chargers out there, it was this idea of passenger vehicles. And we were limited at that time in our vision by technological constraints, right? We did not realize that battery costs and capabilities would come up. Had no idea that we'd be looking at Class 8 freight haulers. And that's the situation that we find ourselves in now. And that is what is incredibly important. Ali Zaidi spoke earlier, and he's always such an inspirational speaker, and he speaks with such passion about how much the president cares about these things. He did say one thing. He said that when somebody comes out and sees a highway, you know, and they may have a mixed reaction with that. As a federal highway administrator, I have to say I love all my children. You know, they're beautiful things, and they are, you know, incredibly important for freight. But, you know, where Ali said something that I completely agree with is that if it's a child living beside that highway, they should not have to breathe in all of that gunk, all of that PM10, that PM 2.5. And if you look at the data, the asthma rates among children who live close to highways, you know, way off the charts compared to those who live farther away. And ports, you know, I've been having a lot of conversations about Baltimore and the bridge and the port that were impacted there, very closely coordinated through the White House. You know, and in driving around up there are lots of homes close to that port. And so one of the other things that we're really interested in doing is, as we build our 21st century transportation network, that we're not doing it the same way we did in the 20th century, and that we are taking into account our impacts on people. And so we're really excited this morning to announce our funding through the reduction of truck emissions at port facilities. This program is an unprecedented effort to minimize truck pollution at U.S. ports. It will allow our economy to keep you know, humming along, and we know that supply chain is critical for our issues. But this $150 million, it's actually about $148 million, being awarded today to 16 projects in 11 states and Puerto Rico, will help improve air quality and reduce pollution for truck drivers, port workers, and families that live in communities surrounding ports. So states across the country will soon have dedicated funding to support low and no emission transportation. I mentioned NEVI. We've distributed about $2.4 billion of the $7.5 billion to the states. I was actually in Vermont yesterday for an unveiling of a very exciting charger. Several of the states have already got chargers underway, and many more are planned for this year. CFI discretionary is another important program for us. It's about $2.5 billion over 5 years. We provided $623 million to projects across the country earlier this year, and those chargers will be going in the ground in very short order. And so, you know, as we think back to this network approach and these ZEV corridors, as we're approaching them, you know, this whole national zero-emission strategy that back in 2011 and back in 2016, we weren't necessarily thinking about freight, it is now possible. And so we're very excited today for our panel discussion that we're going to follow up on all the great conversations that we've had. And I do want to introduce our panelists for this panel on connecting freight corridors, freight hubs with corridors. And we have Patrick McDonald King, who is the CEO of Green Lane, Rakesh Aneja, the Vice President and Chief of E-Mobility with Daimler Trucks North America, Mike Engelhardt, who's the Chief Development Officer with Terawatt. And actually, as part of our CFI announcement, we were actually really excited to partner with New Mexico and place a megawatt charger, a couple of megawatt chargers that Terawatt will be partnering on. So maybe he might talk about that, but it's right in sort of smack dab between LA and Dallas, and we're, again, building out that corridor. Lori Clark, Senior Program Manager, Clean Fleet and Energy Programs, and Clean Cities and Communities Director with the North Central Texas Council of Governments, NCT-COG. It's always a mouthful to get out, but it's a big, growing, bustling place. And then Zaina Alazi, who's the CEO of Gauge Zero. So I'm going to turn it to Rakesh, and each of the panelists will kind of take us through 5 minutes of what their organizations are doing, and then we'll have some time for questions. So Rakesh.
Thank you, Administrator Bhatt, firstly, and good morning, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to just applaud the Biden-Harris administration for the leadership and sustainability. Thank you to the Joint Office, Department of Energy and Transportation, and the all-of-government approach with EPA and everyone. Thank you, Drew, Alicia, Diego, Kevin, in getting us together for this incredible forum and a chance for us to get inspired. My name is Rakesh Aneja. I have the privilege of leading Daimler Truck's zero-emission transformation activities in North America. And I also have the privilege to serve on the board of Green Lane that we'll talk about shortly. From a Daimler Truck perspective, we are fully committed to sustainable transportation. It is our aspiration that by 2039, we exclusively offer carbon neutral products, trucks and buses, starting with the triad markets of North America, Europe, and Japan. And in our experience of the last few years, at a very high level, we've come to recognize 3 factors that are required for this transformation to be successful. The trifecta, so to say, which is certainly having vehicle products that can do the job for our customers, having infrastructure that is reliable and ubiquitously available, and then thirdly, a cost of ownership that is palatable to our customers. And when we started on this journey a few years back, it very quickly dawned on us that infrastructure definitely is the critical pacing item, the bottleneck that's taken much longer compared to the availability of vehicles. At a very high level, again, once the vehicles are in production, we can have those delivered and available to our customers in a few months. However, infrastructure timelines are easily measured in years. So with that backdrop, we wanted to contribute to that journey. We want to support the infrastructure development. And we came together with the unlikeliest of partners, but we formed a joint venture among Daimler Truck North America, NextEra Energy Resources, and BlackRock Alternatives through their Climate Infrastructure Fund, and founded this company called Greenlane. It is a joint venture among the 3 partners with an initial investment commitment of about $675 million, and the goal of setting up a public infrastructure network. We want to design, develop, install, and operate a charging network in the US, and in the future, a hydrogen fueling network as well. And the focus areas are the West Coast, the Texas Triangle, and the East Coast. So since that time, we've been pretty busy. Greenlane's been pretty busy. Very happy to have Patrick McDonald-King, my friend and colleague, onboarded as the CEO of Greenlane. And I'm going to hand it over to him to talk a little bit about what Greenlane has been up to. Patrick?
Thank you, Rakesh. And I'm Patrick McDonald-King, and I'm the CEO of Greenlane. And great introduction to who the company is. I mean, our vision is to roll out a national network of high-speed charging and hydrogen fueling stations for medium and heavy-duty trucks. A lot of this, of how we're actually going to market, is we're developing 3 types of sites. We're actually doing greenfield operations. We're acquiring real estate and developing like a truck stop or a travel center, more traditional like you see it. We're also partnering with existing travel centers and truck stops to actually bolt on and modernize the side of their facilities. And lastly, we're also doing what we call a snap-on version of this, where we're actually partnering with convenience stores and gas stations and dealerships to put a smaller footprint on the map to allow, and really our strategy is to sort of connect every 60 to 90 miles and eventually building out this national network. A lot of the sites that we're actually choosing and the direction that we go to market on is using a data-driven strategy. You can imagine with Daimler has about in excess of 40% market share. We also have a relationship with Uber Freight, which allows us to really have a bird's eye view of the market as a whole over what are the right corridors to light up, what are the right freight and the right type of trucks and partners that are going to market with this. And that allows us to really sort of give a thoughtful decision over where we're actually building facilities and which corridors we're focusing on. I really like the federal strategy that was coming out because we are focused on a corridor strategy and announcing corridors by corridor. I think you'll see our first corridor that we just announced is LA to Vegas, and we're opening up 4 facilities along that path. And our first one gets opened up in the Q4 of this year, which will be in Colton. The Colton location is going to have, once we're fully scaled, it'll have about up to 14 megawatts of power and about 60 chargers, and we'll be able to hammer through about 300 trucks on a daily basis. So it's going to be a pretty high volume site for us, and we're pretty excited about it. I think beyond that, we're sort of lighting up this 280-mile corridor. So beyond this is we sort of talked a little bit of some of the challenges that the industry is facing and some things that actually have to get addressed. And I also think a public-private partnership is really important in order to make this happen. A lot of the reasons that it's really important is that the first few years, there's not enough trucks on the road to actually make this into a true business, right? So we need partnerships, and the amount of time that it actually takes to get energy deployed, infrastructure deployed, it's going to take time and it's going to take an investment, and you're going to have investors with deep pockets, and at the same time as that, have enough support in order to make the business pencil, because it could take 2, 3, even 4 years. And in some cases, you might actually have to wait 2, 3 years to actually get power to the proper sites that you're going through. So utility partnerships are really key to the successes of this as well. I think and I think a lot of some of the other panelists that have been up here, you'll find that every site is a unicorn, right? There's no formula that you can draw out and say, hey, this is going to be the same blueprint for every site. So there's certain challenges, and I'm getting warned of 1 minute remaining there. So the only other thing I just say in this as well is infrastructure is important, vehicle interoperability is important, but technology is also important. I think that in a lot of ways we can look at deploying infrastructure, but when the rubber meets the road, we have to be able to operate these sites in order to guide these companies through electrification and make it a reality. And if they don't have the right tools in place in order to be successful and truly understand the total cost of ownership, how the vehicles will operate with the network and the software and the infrastructure, these are all really super important aspects of making this a success. And unless it's Fisher-Price, you won't see a lot of these companies be able to take the big leap forward in order to make sure that this is a reality of electrifying their fleets. So,
thanks, Patrick and Rakesh. And that was the, that corridor, California to Nevada, is incredibly important. Now we're going to turn it to Mike Engelhardt, who's going to talk about the I-10 California to Texas corridor.
Thank you. Thank you to the administration. Thanks, Drew and Alicia, for facilitating and getting us all together here. Today, our announcement will be joined by the Smart Freight Center for an announcement on the I-10 corridor. This is really exciting industry to be involved in. It is creating what the world will look like in the years to come for transportation. I've been working on logistics, infrastructure, renewable energy projects for over 30 years. And to be a part of this really feels like the culmination of all of that coming together. Terawatt is a $1 billion backed venture primarily focused on heavy-duty Class 8 commercial fleet electrification. We currently have 14 sites under development. 4 of them are scheduled to come online this year. 7 of those sites we'll be talking about are on the I-10 corridor. Today, as we're presenting on the I-10 corridor and announcing our partnership with the Smart Freight Center, we're aggregating demand for charging along that I-10 corridor. And we're working with some of the largest shippers and carriers to aggregate that demand to start running this I-10 corridor from Long Beach to El Paso. The 7 sites that we will be turning up on this corridor all range about 150 miles apart from each other, and they will be facilitated with the most powerful chargers that are available at the time. We're planning for megawatt chargers to be deployed on all of these sites. The initial phases of these sites will be in the 7 to 10 megawatt range with capacity to expand them in some cases to 30 or 40 megawatts per site. In 2022, Terawatt announced that the I-10 corridor was our first focus to start electrifying these corridors. We own an additional 40 sites along other corridors throughout the U.S. that will be next phases of our corridor plans. With the highest power chargers that we're putting on this I-10 corridor, we will be able to charge thousands of trucks a day moving along this corridor. We'll be leveraging on-site renewable energy, storage, grid interconnection, and the combination of all of these power sources will provide the most reliable and resilient charging network along the corridor. As was mentioned earlier, we went through a competitive process with the New Mexico DOT, and we were awarded a CFI grant for the 2 projects in New Mexico, one in Lordsburg and one in Vado, for $63.8 million to build out those 2 sites. They'll be multi-phase sites, and again, at ultimate build-out, they will be in the multiple tens of megawatts of power on those sites. Last but most important is our partnership with the Smart Freight Center to aggregate these shippers and carriers, and we'll have a more thorough announcement on this in the weeks to come. But they'll start utilizing this I-10 corridor first. And so it's really that aggregation of demand that will allow these projects to kick off and have the kind of investments that are needed to get these to launch. We're very excited about the partnership, and stay tuned for more announcements to come on it.
Well, thank you, and it was great to be in New Mexico for that announcement, and there was a lot of excitement, and really looking forward to going back for the ribbon cutting on that important project. So that's the I-10 California to Texas corridor, and then maybe staying in the Texas theme of things, a lot of freight in Texas, and so along the I-10, I-35, and I-45 Texas Triangle corridor, I'm going to turn it over to Lori and Zaina.
Thank you. For the record, I love that Texas has shown up in every one of the conversations thus far on this panel. Everything's bigger in Texas. We'll be talking about 3 highways and 2 fuels. With the North Central Texas Council of Governments, it's an absolute mouthful, worst name we ever could have chosen. But we are a regional planning agency. We serve 16 counties. Our geographic footprint is actually the size of the state of Connecticut. And then the Dallas-Fort Worth urban core is right at the center. So we serve a very large region, and then, of course, are honored to be part of the Department of Energy Clean Cities and Communities Network. And we have major pervasive ozone non-attainment problems. And so there are many reasons that the transition to zero-emission freight is very important to our agency. And Patrick used our favorite words, public-private partnerships. I'm odd man out here as a public sector representative up here on the panel, but we believe in those types of partnerships very firmly. Texas, we don't have a lot of top-down state regulatory policy, as you may know, that drive these types of things. We have a lot of bottom-up, grassroots, locally grown solutions, and a lot of market forces, and very favorable economics in Texas. So if you're not looking at investing in Texas yet, you should do so. But I will start with an announcement about the project on the hydrogen front. As I mentioned, we're going to announce 2 fuels, both hydrogen and electric. So any freight fleet in Texas, no matter what their duty cycle is, no matter what zero-emission platform is better for them, whether that's battery electric or hydrogen fuel cell electric, will be developing the infrastructure around the Texas Triangle to support that transition. So on the hydrogen side, we were very blessed to be selected by Federal Highway Administration, thank you, Administrator Blatt, for one of those charging and fueling infrastructure corridor awards. So we'll be using a $70 million federal investment paired with a private sector match to develop a network of up to 5 hydrogen fueling stations purpose-built for freight trucks around the Texas Triangle. We're anchoring the Triangle, the Houston area, San Antonio area, Dallas, and Fort Worth, and then there will be a midpoint somewhere on the west between the San Antonio and Fort Worth sides with those hydrogen fueling stations. So we'll be collaborating with pilot truck stops under that award to do that project. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Zaina to talk about electric.
Thank you, Lori. Good morning, everyone. My name is Zaina Elazi. I'm the founder and CEO at Gauge Zero. I want to start off by especially thanking our esteemed colleagues at the White House Climate Policy Office, the DOE, the DOT, and the US EPA, as well as the Joint Office for the incredible honor of being able to participate here today in today's event. Gauge Zero is an Austin-based medium and heavy-duty fleet electrification solutions company, and we accelerate the transition to zero emissions by developing, owning, operating reliable and convenient electric fleet charging hubs with no upfront cost to our customers while benefiting communities. My background includes over 20 years of numerous successful initiatives and managing teams across the wind, solar, battery storage space in the US as well as abroad. I'm excited to be here today to present on our recently announced partnership with Hillwood, which is a Fort Worth-based industrial, commercial, and residential real estate development company, which has over 17,000 truck trips per day for warehousing alone at the site. This partnership is to create Texas's first premier commercial EV charging facility catering to trucks and last-mile fleets in Alliance, Texas. As you can see from the photo, we also have planned solar and battery storage, not only at this site, but at other sites as well across the country. Alliance Texas is a global logistics hub consisting of Alliance Mobility Innovation Zone, the BNSF Alliance International Intermodal Facility, one of the largest intermodal hubs in the nation, the Perot Field Fort Worth Alliance Airport, and it has direct access to I-35 and State Highway 170. This site will have an 8-megawatt capacity with over 60 charging ports and the ability to serve approximately 180 trucks per day for multiple fleets. As I mentioned before, we develop, own, and operate the charging hub as part of our network of 16 sites that are planned across the United States. And with that, I give it back to our moderator.
Well, thank you. And it's just, again, so exciting to see this strategic approach looking at corridors. And since Texas is involved in all of these, Lori, and I'm sure that everybody in the country loves when people compare, you know, like, oh, well, that's the size of Connecticut, or DFW is the size of Manhattan. You know, I just, you know, from your perspective, it is, everything is bigger there. A lot of people, a lot of companies have been migrating there. I guess, you know, from your perspective, what are some of the strategic partnerships? I also want to thank you for mentioning hydrogen, because these are alternative fuel corridors. It's not just about electrification, it's hydrogen as well. But, you know, can you give us a few examples of some of those strategic partnerships that are paying off in your area?
Sure, and let me give a little bit of background to give some context to my answer. I think that Federal Highway Administration Alternative Fuel Corridor Program, when it was first announced, there were a lot of people who were like, oh, there's some lines on the map, and we had this suspicion it's far, far more than that, and look at what it led to, really. The CFI corridor project that we developed and we submitted is really an outcome of the very initial corridor designations that we were engaged with TxDOT back in 2016. So this has been a process, right? It doesn't happen overnight, as we've already talked about this morning, but we're here. So I think public-private sector engagement, those public-private partnerships are critical. We developed a plan for Interstate 45 just a couple years ago that published, I want to say, fall of 2021. And we had a lot of private industry stakeholders in that conversation. And one of the things that they kept saying was, you can't do this with I-45. You can't transition the freight industry in Texas unless you hit the entire triangle. You need I-10, you need I-35, which is what really drove our inspiration. So it was hearing that engagement from the industry stakeholders. Port Houston is a major partner, being able to brainstorm projects on that southeastern, the coastal point of the Texas Triangle to connect inland. We, in our region, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, need to know what's happening in Houston, need to know what's happening in San Antonio. So the network of public sector agencies engaging with the private sector. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Clean Cities and Communities Network, because as a coalition, we're able to instantly tap into that national brain trust of all the coalitions and be able to get those best practices and truth out. Who are the major players? What's happening on the ground? So that when our stakeholders like Hillwood or like Encore Electric Delivery, who handles utility distribution in our region, come to us with questions, we have confidence and we know how to be able to respond so that we can build confidence among all of the stakeholders that are really critical in putting these projects together.
Well, thank you. I think that planning aspect is incredibly important, and I'm going to turn to Patrick and Mike now, but that was one of the reasons when we were evaluating all of the CFI projects that the project in New Mexico really stood out, because you could look on the map and say, strategically, this makes sense for a corridor. You know, just a couple of, you know, for Patrick or Mike, and you guys could decide who goes first here, but I think there's a couple of things that have stood out to me here, right? Like, one, transportation has generally been pretty simple for 100 years or so, right? Put down a road and then cars show up, and now we're looking at this intersection of energy, transportation. How do you scale it? How do you take this business and scale these models? And then what do you need from us to make sure that the energy is there when the vehicles are showing up?
I think that things that we're doing with the Smart Freight Center, being able to aggregate demand will really guide us to where we're able to scale next. Where do the shippers and carriers want to take their goods? Where do their routes lead them to? We've had some great partnerships with shippers and carriers in the last several months running multiple test pilots, testing new lanes for them, where we've installed temporary chargers in locations for them to test a specific route. So I think that those partnerships, bringing the shippers, the carriers together, understanding needs, understanding growth patterns, allows us the foresight to figure out which corridors are next and where we're going to grow with them. From the energy side, that's going to be a tough one. You know, our projects to deliver and to try to get to parity with diesel fueling, these trucks are going to need to get a charge in 20, 30 minutes. That's going to happen with the megawatt level chargers. Getting that amount of power on the site is going to be kind of all things are considered, renewables, battery storage, as well as grid connected. And we're working with a lot of our utility partners planning phased development, where as demand grows, our sites grow. It was, I think, mentioned in the last panel that, you know, we have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 of our sites, and we're working with utilities to phase in that power as the demand grows, to be able to go from 10 megawatts to 20 to 40 over, you know, the next several years as demand continues to increase.
And I'd probably just add in this is that, look, this is an industry that's going through a lot of challenges and a lot of headwind as we look at it right now. Like over 70% of all freight in the United States is transported on trucks, right? You've also got an industry that's growing at like 10% per year, and with all of the change with COVID and Amazon and so forth. Hiring challenges, 100% turnover, so we got to create a better experience for them at the same time. I think a lot of it is just providing that guiding hand and that sort of walking them through the process and providing them with the right intelligence for them to make the right decisions. I think also is between all of us, and I look at all the infrastructure providers in the room, is we also have to look, there's not enough infrastructure to go around, so we have to actually work together through roaming agreements, be able to utilize each other's infrastructure, and ensure that this becomes more sort of, if you look at how your Visa card will work in every single restaurant, or your cell phone, well, you can talk to Verizon can talk to T-Mobile. We have to get to the point where this is actually a holistic approach to the industry. Otherwise, you're going to start creating charging on islands, and it's not going to be a holistic approach for the industry. And until it's a holistic approach, the industry is not going to make that transformation to electrification, because it's not cheap, it's not easy, and there's a lot of intelligence that they don't have. I actually think it's interesting, once working directly with a vehicle manufacturer, is why would they have relationships with utilities 10 years ago? It wouldn't have existed, right? But you're actually seeing with all the vehicle OEMs is they're actually having an ongoing dialogue in order to help plan and help actually forecast the future. And it's just a changing market landscape, and we have to be there to guide them.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And, you know, at the Department of Transportation, we've primarily been building the transportation infrastructure, and that's why it's a great partnership with the Joint Office to bring that energy and transportation nexus together. You know, but speaking of an OEM, Rakesh, you sort of bring a unique perspective. You've worked globally on this challenge. You know, tell us what we're getting right, you know, with that global perspective, and where we have some room for opportunity for improvement.
Yeah, thanks, Shaylin, for that question. It is the largest challenge the energy and transportation industries have seen since inception. So I often say that it's going to take a global village to raise the sustainability child. And most, if not all of us, have been in those situations where we have global connections, we are part of a global organization. So there is plenty of opportunity to collaborate and learn from each other. At the outset, I'll say what we have going on here, I think that's tremendous. This is just amazing, this all-of-government approach, if I can use that terminology, the work that the Joint Office is doing. I have the privilege of working with Dr. Rachel Neeler and Gabe Klein and several others in this room on the EV working group. And that, I think, is a fabulous initiative where our task given by the secretaries is to come up with actionable goals, metrics, and recommendations that can actually influence policy. And I'm not sure if those types of frameworks and setups exist globally. but I think we have a great thing going on here, and our worlds are really colliding, and I mean that in a very positive way, where all of our local initiatives, the work we're doing within our companies, and these government initiatives, they're coming together, and we have the opportunity to connect the dots. And you know, I would summarize then, I would conclude by saying, going back to those 3 pillars that I mentioned earlier, we really believe that for this transformation to be successful, we need products that can do the job for our customers, we need a palatable cost of ownership, and we need infrastructure. So the vehicle products, let's say that's the task of the vehicle OEMs. I think they are up to that challenge. We are up to that challenge. Our peers are up to the challenge. It's the infrastructure and cost of ownership piece where we can learn a lot within the country, of course, and globally as well. How can we incentivize some of the initial infrastructure developments? How can we incentivize the cost of ownership piece as well? What is the energy rate, for example, right? The dollar per kilowatt hour, for example, of energy charging, and what sort of tax advantage can be provided to seed the market. So those would be some of the opportunities, I would say, to continue to work on.
Well, I love that global village to raise this sustainability child. And then I think about my daughters who are 8 and 10, and I could use a global village sometimes. Luckily, I have a very tolerant and patient wife. Zaina, you know, just coming back to you on the, you know, we talked a lot about the complexities of this deployment, and then a couple of people have talked about, you know, and Secretary Buttigieg talks a lot about this. How do we take complex problems and make them understandable and much more simple for people to understand? But, you know, how are you navigating some of the complexities of this very difficult challenge?
Thank you for the question, Shaylin. So I think there's a few pieces that have already been mentioned by a lot of my colleagues earlier today. I mean, partnership and collaboration are critical. It is a very complex ecosystem, right? So it takes understanding the inputs of hardware, software, cost of the vehicles themselves, and then implementing all of that to a very specific budget and outcome that our customers can reliably depend upon. I think our unique proposition is that we're not just focused on the coastal states. So we have a national perspective to really understand what our customers are looking for to electrify their fleets across the board. Our customers love that we're nationwide, and they also really love that we are really focused on reliability. I think reliability has been mentioned over and over again. Our logistics and other customers need to know that when they pull up to charge, they can do so efficiently, and they can rely on our facilities. I will join my colleagues in making another announcement myself here this morning. We released a press release that we have just announced a new electric charging site that we are launching in Fontana, California, in collaboration with Camway Transportation. That site is a 5-megawatt site to serve 130 trucks, and we'll have 50 ports. And as we've been hearing from a lot of people here today, the improvement to local health is a critical component to the work that we do. So understanding that cities such as Fontana, which are not port adjacent and not necessarily on a freight corridor, do have economies that are driven largely by industrial uses. So understanding that and providing a solution to them, particularly for the trucking-based industries, is also at the core of what we do with our national build-out strategy.
Well, I appreciate that perspective and all of the exciting announcements that have been made here today. And just maybe to wrap this up, I would say it is a big, complex, daunting challenge. There is over a century of infrastructure in this country that has been built around the internal combustion engine, and it served its job and served its job well. But while a lot of us are sort of looking at this as this big, daunting problem, I would say if we look around, we're at the White House with a whole of government approach, some of the brightest minds in the private sector, academia coming together, and I am just completely confident that we are going to solve this problem. And, you know, I remember when I was a kid, you could go and you could fill up with leaded gasoline or unleaded gasoline, right? And today you'd be like, who would put lead in gasoline and spew that out? And I think that decades from now, my daughters, who are 8 and 10 now, are going to be like, wow, you remember when Dad used to work on that problem of having all that bad air, and now we've got this really clean transportation system. So I am just really grateful for all the minds, grateful for the convening, and thank you very much to the panel for a great session.
Thank you.
Shaylin, thank you so much, and thank you, panelists. First of all, let me say what a great morning session. A big round of applause really for all the panelists and all the moderators. Really extraordinary and sets the stage for some really robust conversations coming up. Let me try to guide you through the rest of the day. But before I do that, let me first thank the Climate Policy Office team. So Diego and Katie and Zoe and Mary Frances, you guys were great. Thank you very much. Big round of applause for these guys. All right, so bear with me as I walk through. We're actually on the Navy side of the building. Years ago, this was the Swan building, and this was the Navy wing. So we're going to go down the stairs, and we'll go out the door, and we'll hit the stairs right there, hit the Navy steps right there, and we'll take a photo. So that's the first thing we'll do after we leave. Very important. I would love to get the sign so that we have that up front as well. Cool, thanks. And then things get a little tricky right after that, right? So, so we have our breakout session number 1. If you all turn to these pieces of paper. Actually, Diego, do I have the high sign or not? We do have the high sign. Really? Okay. Excellent. All right, well, let me go through this and then I'll talk about that. So the first panel, the first group, promoting environmental justice and an equitable zero-emission freight system, led by Molly Greenberg, note-taker Austin Brown. That is from 12:30 to 2:30 in room 228. And I said before in the morning, after we take the photo, come on back into the building. I will lead you to Ike's Eatery, and we can all get lunch there. And then you can't take, no one can take food into these historic breakout rooms, but you can eat, and actually Austin's an old hand at this, so it can help as well, try to figure out where you guys want to eat. It's nice enough to eat in the picnic benches out there too. A word about the panels, and we have Alicia's great ambition to thank for this. These are sort of supercharged breakout sessions, in my view, because you actually have your own panels within each of your breakout sessions. So the moderator will moderate the panel, and then you'll actually go into Q&A and do a real breakout session, and then different moderators have different ideas on, their own ideas on how to do that, which is great. The questions are, and I read them here so you can think about them a little bit, and let me give you some color. Number 1, solutions to key challenges from the perspective of each major stakeholder. Let me emphasize that. From the perspective of each major stakeholder, what are the solutions to key challenges required to accelerate the transition to zero-emission freight within the freight hubs and corridors identified in Phase 1 of the National Zero-Emission Freight Corridor Strategy? And Phase 1 is from 2024, so now, to 2027. So help us understand, from the perspective of the power companies and the fleets and the OEMs and the equity organizations, et cetera, infrastructure companies, where are your big challenges and what solutions would you recommend? Would love to know all of that. That is a rich question to dig into. Second question, public policy to build the business case for 3 or more heavy-duty vehicle segments. Whenever I talk about heavy-duty vehicles, I immediately think about what segment are we talking about. This is not light-duty vehicles. Are we talking about Class 8 long haul? Are we talking about drayage? Are we talking about urban delivery? What are we talking about? Those are different vehicles, different duty cycles, different needs, et cetera. So let's break it down. right? So second question, let's dig further into what the trucking sector actually is. What are we talking about in terms of segment? And then evaluate the business case for zero-emission vehicles and provide suggestions on how public policy can help accelerate the transition. So again, almost the same question, but not from the perspective of stakeholders, but from vehicle segments, right? Help us understand where your challenges are and what the solutions are there. Emphasis always on not just a litany of, gee, these are the challenges, Bill Van Ammenberg, but the solutions, right? Finally, as I said before, and we're all united on this, we wanted this to be a sustained effort. Give us some advice. You've now been through the morning session. You're all practitioners in this area. What would be the best thing for us to do to carry this effort forward? Right. So those are your 3 questions. I think your moderators will also throw questions in there. The way it's going to work, because we want to capture all of the perspectives here, this is an incredibly rich group of practitioners, will take notes. I'm going to be taking notes. Austin will take notes. Alicia will take notes. Diego will take notes. Rachel will take notes. And then we'll take the notes actually in front of you on a screen. So this is like real-time note-taking. And we'll capture all that. There will be a readout, what we call a White House readout, a day or 2 after this, but those are relatively short, a couple paragraphs. They are not going to capture the wealth and richness of what we hear. We'll figure out another way of doing that, but fear not that it won't be lost, right? It'll go to educate us in what we're doing going forward. All right. So that is that. Let me look at my notes here. Right. So thank you, Dawn. Wait, this is hot off the press? Oh, okay. Let me say this. So we are delighted. It took a lot of time, an amazing amount of time, but we are delighted to be able to have 2 heavy-duty electric trucks on display. This is not a ride and drive. There will be nobody doing wheelies in front of the White House in an electric tractor trailer. We have the Volvo VNERE, sorry. And thank you, Dawn and team, for bringing that in. And the E-Cascadia, thank you, Rakesh and team, for bringing that in. Navistar tried mightily to bring in their truck, but due to circumstances beyond our control, we were unable to bring them in, but no fault of theirs. Let me just emphasize that, and our apologies to Navistar. They will be right on Jackson Place, is that correct? Okay. So for those that aren't, everyone other than Group 1, once you're done the Navy Steps, you can go north out that gate, and if you continue north, you'll hit Jackson Place and you'll see the trucks, which would be really neat. So do that, and then there's a lot of restaurants over to the left. For the groups that leave the compound, much gnashing of teeth about that, because you then have to come back into the compound. Please don't wait till 2 o'clock to try to get in through security. Please show up around 1:30. We'll get you through security. You've already been waved through a second time, and then you'll go to your breakout sessions. My note here says that I need to clarify that you need to go to the breakout session that you are assigned to. Please no mixing and matching, no free form, no freelancing. Please, very carefully assigned. The chemistry has been well thought out. This is like OkCupid for breakout sessions. So please don't mess with that. What else do I have here? And then no food or drinks in the historic room. Sorry about that, but you can't bring food or drinks back. Water's okay. All right, and then I'm going to stare at Alicia at the end here just to see if I'm missing anything. But the last thing I will say is we had wanted to bring everybody back to do a readout of the breakouts, but we just didn't have the room. We had to move the date, as you know. But we will do a voluntary, completely optional, but would love to see you at the Black Fin, which is a relatively large, hospitable pub just a couple blocks away. You can find it on your Google Maps, and I will certainly be there after this event. Would love to see you all if you wanted to tip a pint and share. And Alicia, could you just take one photo of me, since this is my last moment here at the White House, and I'd like to capture this for posterity. I noticed that Alicia was taking photos of everybody else, and I thought, well, I definitely wanted to. All right. That is, I think, all I've got. But Alicia, is there anything else we need to say or do? Yeah, and staring at Diego or Kevin. Okay, all right. Thank you all again. Really scintillating. Look forward to. I guess the last thing is for whoever's in group. Is it group 5? Group 5. Group 5. Apologies, but your breakout session is from 3:30 to 5:30. So whoever's in group 5. My sincere apologies. We tried to do what we could not. That will be moderated by Craig, and Rachel has also volunteered to step in, so thank you for that. Rachel and Diego will take notes on that. And with that, thank you again for all for coming, and we will, wait. The pub again is the Black Fin. After 4 o'clock, you can head on over there. 5:30 is the last session. Right. Well, okay. So, and then for those of you who get there at 4, 4:30, or 5, we need to wait for. It's only proper if we wait until at least 6 for the folks at 5:30 to get there. It would be rude if we left early. I'm gonna now not say anything, and the moderators are, federalism at its best. 1,000 flowers bloom. Okay. With that, thank you all very much for being here. Really appreciate all that you're doing. Let's go downstairs to the Navy steps. To the park.